Hey guys, this is Rob Paulson, and you're listening to the Geekcast Radio Network.
GeekCastRadio.com presents the Geekcast Radio Top 100 Animated Films Countdown.
Who am I? Who am I? I am the guardian of lost souls. I am the powerful, the pleasurable, the indestructible Mushu.
Hey, dragon, not lizard. I don't do that tongue thing.
Hello and welcome to Geekcaster Radio episode 54. I am one of your hosts, Tio and Mike. Joining me is Optimus Solo. Hello.
I'm here.
You are here. Steve Megatron. Hello.
Hello.
Lord. It's gonna be one of those nights. And Movie Roll Dan. Hello.
How's it going?
Wow. Why did Michael Wilson join the call? Holy crap. Today we continue on with the countdown of the top 100 animated films. We are revealing numbers 60 through 41 in this episode. Alright, any initial stuff we need to get out of the way, Kev?
Well, I think this, as always, well, we've only done 2 of these countdowns, but as is the trend, I mean, this is the middle episode. This is the 3rd out of the 5 actual countdown episodes. And so, in that respect, it's interesting. It's kind of a mixed bag. I don't mean that in a negative connotation. But like we've discussed before, you know, your first half, first third, first quarter of the countdown, you know, it can be a lot of those films that get really highly ranked, but not as widely ranked. And then you transition into films that, you know, it almost becomes a rule where you have to be on... once you reach a certain level in the countdown, you basically have to be on at least, you know, half the list in order to appear. So this is kind of that transition phase, I guess, since it's covering the halfway point. And to kind of put some statistics, I guess, behind my speech, so it's not just all talk. Once we hit... which we'll do in this episode. Once we hit the number 50, from then on out, we will never have a movie that's not listed on at least half of the submitted lists. So that is something that kind of happens as you turn that corner. It's also an interesting episode because we get to discuss a little bit as far as if something is top 50 material or if something is not top 50 material. A lot of times with these types of countdowns, it's not, I don't have too much of a problem. Like, let's say if, you know, something shows up that's 61 and I think it should be 68, or, you know, within individual rankings, it's not that big a deal. And like Dan has referenced in some of the forum posts, you know, it's not necessarily about the numbers for everybody. I like to look at it in more broad spectrums as far as like groups of 10, or in this case of, do I think something deserves to be top 50 or do I think something should not be in the top 50? And that's something we can discuss a little bit as we move through this episode, as we'll get the last films that don't make the top 50 and the first films that do make it. Other than that, I just thought we could go around maybe just real quickly. Anybody that has any thoughts about the movies that have been mentioned so far, things that they've noticed, things they're surprised about, things they're looking for as we transition here into the other half of the countdown, reactions to the feedback we've been getting on the website or anything like that. I thought I'd start with Dan, just to get your thoughts so far as we near the halfway point of this countdown.
Well, I guess just starting on the feedback, I think it's pretty awesome how much feedback we're actually getting just on the forum pages alone.
There's a few comments.
Yeah, just a lot of comments, a lot of good discussion. A lot of people who agree with us, some that don't, which is good, makes for fun discussion. The biggest, like, to me, the thing that I took away so far within the 2 episodes we've done is just, I'm surprised by the amount of, like, recent movies. A lot of movies from this past, 10, 15 years or so. I wasn't expecting that as much. I figured that within the first episode, the first 20, you would get some of that. But even as we have gone further, we've gotten that as well. And we haven't really seen a lot of the big players show up yet. Like, there hasn't been many Hayao Miyazaki movies. There hasn't been many any Pixar movies at all. So that has me wondering, what we have in store. So those are the two big things that I've really noticed, just the amount of current films and some of the bigger names that are still have yet to be spoken for.
And again, this is a little different than we did when we did our top 100 animated series list. When we did our top 100 animated series list, we spent some time before we got to the actual countdown talking about honorable mentions, talking about things that didn't quite make the countdown so that we could at least discuss some of those things. And this time we decided to do that more in the wrap-up. So we will still get to talk about movies that don't make the top 100 that got voted on. But we're doing it this way, I guess in a way so that it keeps it more of a mystery, whether stuff is even on the list or not, where we kind of tipped our hand a little bit with the top 100 animated series list. And again, as you guys have probably known since you've been listening, that I'm the only one that knows which movies are on the countdown and which ones are not. So there might be ones that you guys are expecting to see that we don't see. And you mentioned the feedback. I'm somewhat surprised at how, there's films here and there that people probably are questioning, or like I said, like individual rankings where some people might think it should be a little bit higher, should be a little bit lower. We have a poll on the website now that says, do you agree with our top 100 countdown so far? And 10 out of the 12 people are either 50-50 or yes. So, it's generally positive so far. And the other thing that I think you brought up that's crazy to me at this point is you said that we have not had a single Pixar film yet. And we're almost nearing the halfway point. Is that...
I think that's going to be our G1 for this countdown, honestly. And what I mean by that is one of the biggest criticisms of the animated series countdown is that Transformers G1 was number 3 overall of that countdown. And I think with Pixar, we haven't even, we're approaching the top 60 at this point, top 50, getting into the 40s. We haven't seen a single Pixar film. I could have sworn Ratatouille would have at least been at number 88 or something like that. And I think that's probably what's not going to really anger people, but that's going to be like, oh, that's their bias. They love Pixar, blah, blah, blah.
Well,
blah,
there's two possibilities, obviously, since we have not had a Pixar film yet. Either we're not going to rank as many Pixar films as people think we should, or we're going to have a top half that's maybe more loaded with Pixar films than people would think so. A couple other things kind of going overall so far. We have had, I've been somewhat fighting sickness for about 10 days, so bear with me. But we've had about 5 or 6, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Marvel or DC films. That's another thing that we kind of brought up the question during the last couple episodes, is if we were done with those, if we would see any more, if we would see any Marvel films whatsoever, if we would see more DC films. And then, going along some other trends, we did not have a single anime film in our last episode, our last section. The first episode we did, we had a couple up here in that 100 through 81, and we did not have any 80 through 61. So I guess that's something to be on the lookout too, as we near the halfway point. Will anime show up again? If so, where? Which ones? And stuff like that. So there's a lot of things to kind of look for. Steve, any reaction so far as to what you've seen through the first 40 and what we're expecting as we kind of near that halfway mark?
Well, for me, with the first 40, I've been kind of amazed at how many from the same companies that have shown up, such as Disney or a little bit of DreamWorks, a little bit of DC Animation. I'm kind of surprised with how big the pool is, and I could be wrong, as this episode and the future one shall tell, that there aren't more anime and foreign in there. I know that myself and like a few others may not have. Yeah, I didn't want to single you out, but
I'm proud of it. I don't care. I'm not an anime fan.
I know, and for those that didn't listen to the first episode, go back and listen to it so that you kind of understand our viewpoint. But with 20 to 30 people ranking in these, things could end up anywhere, and I'm kind of surprised that. But again, things could show up later on that depending on how many votes, because like you said, Kevin. It'll start showing up on more lists as the list goes closer to one. So, but yeah, I mean, I'm kind of surprised about that. I'm kind of surprised Marvel hasn't had anything show up yet. If it's going to at all, I'm surprised kind of at Pixar, but I kind of agree with Mike too, that it's going to be kind of the TFG one of the entire thing, being that for the most part, Pixar does have, I mean, it's not like Transformers anyway, because it's better quality overall for most of the films. I'm just hoping that some that are worse than others don't show up. But I have loved the feedback on the website though. That's been really cool, and going back and forth, even though some of us have butted heads a little bit on it, it's still been fun.
But yeah, the discussion is what's fun. The continuing the conversation in any form is fun. I think I checked a little bit ago. We were over 60 comments on that the first episode's post. Obviously, by the time you hear this, we'll have already had lots of comments on the second episode, etc. Dan also brought up something that we kind of touched upon throughout the episode so far, is the heavy amount of 2000s and 90s. Now, it's always, I don't know, it's always so weird for me talking about the 2000s, because technically we're in the second decade, but it's so easy to lump them all together, which sometimes isn't fair. But we have had over 20 films so far in that first 40 were from 2000 onward. So that's basically half the films that we've talked about so far have been from 2000 onward. And then about a fourth of them have been in the 90s. We literally have only had 3 films from the 80s. That was Fox and the Hound, and then we had Ninja Scroll, and we had Kiki's Deliveries. I'm sorry, 4 Oliver and Company. So we've had less than 5 films from the 80s. We've only had 2 films that have predated the 80s so far, and that was 1978's Watership Down and 1970's The Aristocats. Does that shock anybody, Dan, as far as the lack of not only 80s but pre-80s, that we haven't seen a single thing outside of those 2 that dated before 1980?
That does shock me. In some ways, I think what happens too is just we've been, I think for like the last, since maybe the onset of Pixar or computer generation, we've just been like bombarded with more animation than ever. So I think it's just sometimes when doing these lists, it's what's fresh in people's minds. So they might not think back into the earlier days. But also what might happen is it's front loaded with all the classics, because, what has stayed true since the earlier days, people may rate higher. So that might be what makes up the majority of the list. So you might have a unbalanced list where you have like all the recent stuff up front, and then all the classic stuff is more reserved for the front end. So that's also a possibility. Obviously, we don't know that, but the fact that we've only had a few in the 80s, which is surprising, because if you look at our like genre list, we've kind of dominated in the 80s, and only a few prior to that is a little bit shocking. But like I said, it's hard to say without knowing what's to come.
Well, and the other thing that sometimes I'm almost surprised that we've had so many films from the 2000s, because what happens the more recent, I think there's 2 different ways to look at it. In one way, like you said, it's fresh in your mind. It's what you've seen lately, so you think about it and you may rate it higher because you haven't had time for it to like digest so much. But a lot of times stuff that comes out more recently doesn't get a place on lists like this because not enough people have seen them. Whereas the longer something has been out, the more likely it is that a wider range of people have had the chance to see something. So it's kind of interesting to see how that's playing out and what we'll see going forward. Any other thoughts about what you expect, what you fear, what you're scared of, what you're hoping to see as we move into today's episode? Dan, or Mike, start with you.
Well, the thing is, going back to the whole decade thing, everybody's always not really criticized us for this. A lot of people love us for this, but since the majority of us grew up in the 80s, we started out as an 80s Transformers-centric kind of network, because that's where Steve and I started our origins with Transformers podcast. But we've always catered ourselves towards the 80s specifically, and that's kind of what I'm glad that we haven't had. I'm happy that there's been a lot of some 90s, a lot of 2000s, because you don't want to have someone say, "Oh, those are just those 80s Transformers podcast guys. That's all they like is stuff from the 80s. They don't care about the other decades." Yeah, whatever. So I'm interested to see what other films from the 80s show up, but I'm kind of glad that hardly any of them have.
Steve, any last thoughts?
No, I think everybody's pretty much summed it up.
And Dan, anything before we move on to what will be the turning point in our countdown from the halfway, what doesn't make the top 50 to what does?
No, I'm just looking to get the list started.
All right, well, let's not wait any further, then let's get on with the list.
60.
All right, we're starting today, as he said, with number 60, as we hit our last 10 films that will be on this side of the 50 mark. We talked a lot in that intro about years, about things that we've seen and trends that we've seen. Well, I guess it will, at least for now, continue as we start this episode. Number 60 coming from the year 1998, Disney film. Mike, usually you have a guess.
98. Oh, crap. All I remember from that year is missing A Quest for Camelot to go to a Garth Brooks concert. Holy crap.
All right.
98. Is it Atlantis?
Close.
Mulan?
It is the movie Mulan. So, number 60 is Mulan from 1998, Disney film. It got 519 points. Remember, the most you can possibly get in this countdown is 2,000. That would be a perfect score. Number 1 rank from all 20 lists. It got 519. It was on 9 lists. The highest it got ranked was 13th. Rotten Tomato score of 86. Dan, your thoughts on starting still in the late 90s here, still with some of that Disney era stuff that we had an extensive discussion about in one of our previous episodes, as far as how the different 90s Disney films stack up against each other. Where does Mulan rank amongst those other ones? It seems at this point to be one of the higher ones that we've seen, because we've seen a lot of the other ones in the previous episode. So how do you feel like this one ranking where it does here at number 60?
I think it's about right. I think it is not near the top echelon of Disney of the 90s, but it's, I think, above things like Tarzan, A Hunchback of Notre Dame. Maybe they may be about even, but much above, like, I would even say something like Lilo and Stitch or something like that. I do really like Mulan. I do think, similar to other Disney movies of the time, it does get kind of lost in the shuffle. I just do think it's a good story. I love the animation, and I love it's like Disney going into an ethnic world and doing it properly. As we all know that, Disney in the past doesn't always handle racial stereotypes all that well, but this was kind of the opposite end of that, where they were really spotlighting a different part of the world they really never dealt with previously, and did a good job with it. I do like the character of Mulan, and they took that classic fable, Chinese fable, I believe, and made it into a solid story. And Eddie Murphy, I mean, I think him as that dragon, in a lot of ways, maybe what landed him the spot as the donkey in Shrek. So some people may say that's a good thing. Some people may say that's a bad thing. But of all the Disney movies that, not including things like Lion King or Aladdin, the cream of the crop, I do think this is like, a good spot for it, I think, as we move into the more classic Disney.
And for those trying to remember which ones we've ranked already that are in the same time frame that we listed off the other day, outside of a Goofy movie, because that's kind of a different ball of wax, we've already listed Pocahontas, we've already listed Tarzan, we've already listed Hunchback of Notre Dame, and Emperor's New Groove, which I feel all of those are kind of from that same chapter in the Disney world. Which means that the only ones that we really haven't talked about from that era would be Mulan, which we're talking about right now. And the only other one that I'm thinking that, looking at a list of Disney releases from the 90s, the only other one that we haven't talked about is Hercules. So, Mike, how do you feel about Mulan coming in at number 60 compared to those other Disney movies we just mentioned?
I like Mulan. I think 60 is, shocker. I kind of agree with Dan that, going into the more classic that you have this story here at number 60. I like all the characters in it. And Eddie Murphy just brings his star power to what is probably the smallest role he's ever had as far as the character's size. But it's really, really interesting what this story did, because not only is it showing that, you know, women can be empowered, but it's also showing, you know, family values and doing right by your parents and etc. and all that. The animation is wonderful. I was kind of shocked that Stevie Wonder did a song for the soundtrack, so that was interesting. But overall, I'm happy with Mulan here. I think it's, you know, it's going to be a stepping stone to see what other more classic Disney films come in later.
Steve, how about you? Where does Mulan stack up against the rest of the 90s Disney stuff?
I think it actually stacks up pretty well. It's one of the few that, towards the end of the decade, that still kind of at least had that torch of what was.
Right.
So, I mean, I kind of agree with it being on here where it is. Plus, you have the awesomeness of Eddie Murphy as Mushu. That's just, you know, that's just one of the most memorable moments of that film. And I think he actually, between that and his working with that cricket and Mulan, I think it just kind of, that dynamic is kind of cool in the film. But the music's definitely memorable in it. The animation's definitely good. The plot's pretty good. So I mean, it's still one of those kind of more original ones before they started, or even some of the previous ones before this used kind of the cookie cutter. I would rather watch this over Pocahontas or Tarzan or, you know, some of the other ones that have been on the list so far.
All right, so it's a consensus that this is better than the ones we've listed so far. It's how we start our countdown today with number 60, and let's see where we go from this one.
59.
All right, I feel like the first few ones we're talking about today are almost like a recap of where we've been so far. We've talked about the late 90s. We've talked about that chapter of Disney so far. And with number 59, we're going to talk about something else that we've spent a decent amount of time talking about in our previous episodes. And I've asked the question a couple times as far as if we had eventually seen the last of these, and apparently the answer is still not. Number 59, we're going back to the world of DC animated universe here. And that is with Justice League Crisis on Two Earths from 2009. 523 points. It was on 9 lists. The highest it got ranked was number 11. I've asked the question before as far as, you know, obviously we'll talk about the other DC films that have made it. This is now, I believe, the 6th DC film to make the countdown. We started with World's Finest. Then later came Dark Knight Returns Part 2. Return of the Joker, Dark Knight Returns Part 1, Batman Under the Red Hood, and now, above all of those so far, Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. Is that where it should be in comparison to the other DC films, Mike?
I think that's more of a personal preference as far as what you like from those films. Like, I know for me, I liked Crisis on Two Earths, but I like Under the Red Hood better as far as the overall story. The animation isn't it's not as jarring as I thought. Like something like Superman, not Doomsday, Batman Superman Apocalypse was. But with Justice League Crisis on Two Earths being at 59, that's interesting, because now I'm wondering if any of the other Justice League animated films that they've put out are going to come up. And I'm also wondering where, if at all, hopefully not, Batman Gotham Knight gets ranked, because that was... but Justice League Crisis on Two Earths, it has a really interesting story. It's pretty much like all your other parallel universe types of things. I found it really interesting that the way Superman realizes Lex Luthor is from a parallel universe is he X-rays him, and all Lex's organs are on the wrong side of his body. They're on the opposite side, so it's like looking into a mirror, which is really, really interesting.
Steve, you're a knowledgeable guy in the DC universe here. How does it stack up? Should it be higher than those ones that we mentioned already?
No, not at all. And it's not just personal preference or any of that kind of stuff, because the way I see it is, yes, it was a good film. I won't deny that. To me, for one, the voice acting was kind of mediocre throughout the thing. They all sounded too similar in a lot of the characters, so it was kind of hard to differentiate sometimes. Two, the animation's good, don't get me wrong, but I don't find this story to be as compelling and as important as Under the Red Hood or Return of the Joker or The Dark Knight Returns saga, because those are more gut-wrenching, they're more emotionally tied, there's more character development and character-driven plotline, whereas The Crisis on Two Earths, yes, it's kind of character-driven, but it's more of solving a problem. It's the typical formula, whereas the Return of the Joker, The Dark Knight Returns, and Under the Red Hood are, yes, they're fixing a problem, but it also has to deal with something that's more of an emotional character development over anything else. So I find those three films to be superior to Crisis on Two Earths or World's Finest. So
before Dan goes, I want to give some background here, and I'm doing this purely off of memory. First of all, Steve is kind of right. The voices do sound the same, except for, at least for me too, which is Superman, played by Mark Harmon, who most people will know him as Leroy Jethro Gibbs from NCIS, and James Woods as Owlman. Those two performances were damn good. As far as the background stuff, Crisis on Two Earths was originally supposed to be Justice League Worlds Collide. Dwayne McDuffie, actually it was a number of years before he passed away, but he wrote this as a tie-in to Justice League Season 2 into Justice League Unlimited. And there are still elements within Crisis on Two Earths that are there that you can kind of see what they were going to do if that was going to be a Justice League animated film for the cartoon series. But he basically rewrote the entire thing and created this film. And it was something really interesting that they did, that it started out as one thing and then they turned it into something completely different. Yes, I do agree with Steve. The Batman films are more character driven, because you have with the Justice League movies, any of them, because there's usually 7 or more members of the Justice League, it's hard to be able to focus on 1 or 2 at a time when you have so many characters all over the place. What about you, Dan? What did you feel about Crisis on Two Earths?
It's definitely a good movie. I don't think it is nearly as good as DC's best. Like we mentioned, Under the Red Hood, especially Dark Knight Returns, it's not nearly to that level. To me, a good equation would be like Crisis on Two Earths is similar to Dark Knight Returns as Avengers is to the Dark Knight. It's just this big event that is, it is popcorn fun, but there's not a lot to it. It's just a bunch of set pieces kind of put together that you can enjoy. And there are some interesting elements with Owlman and his relationship with Batman and how they're give and take. I do think Owlman's probably the most interesting character in that entire cartoon. But I just don't think it's on the same levels as other Justice League stuff. I honestly think like New Frontier, I prefer that. I just like the fact that it's different and like the classic animation style, and like something like Dark Knight Returns is such like more rich and deep and gets at to like the heart of what makes comics amazing, more so than Crisis on Two Earths, because it's a concept we've kind of seen before in Justice League Unlimited or Justice League or in comics a lot, where you have this team from another dimension and they come in and, the back and forth between that. It's a concept that's been done. It's done fine here. It's done well, but I don't think there's anything about it that is all that different from what we've seen previously. So I do think it maybe belongs on this list, but not nearly at this high a level, and not higher than any of the Batman movies we've talked about. I would probably put it ahead of like World's Finest, just because of the animation, and I think the voice cast is just overall stronger. Maybe not regarding like some of the bigger characters, but I just like the vast difference between someone like James Woods and some of the other characters. But I don't know. It's okay, but I think it's much too high.
I'm just interested to see the number of DC films that we are coming across as we make our way through the countdown, and we'll see if there's any more to come or if that is the end of it. We'll see where we go from here.
58.
So with number 58, we are going to see from a company that we haven't seen yet, but not from a decade that we haven't seen yet. And coming in at number 58 from the year 2011, the film is Rango. Rango appeared on 10 lists, so that is half of the submitted lists. It was highly ranked by one individual all the way up at number 11 in their 100. 525 points, Rotten Tomatoes gives it an 88. What do we think about Rango? This is one I can't comment on a lot. I have not seen it yet, although I wanted to. It just kind of flew by me and I missed it. So let's start with Dan. Dan, your thoughts on Rango coming in at number 58?
I really love Rango, honestly. I did not expect to going into it at all, but I was amazed, one, by the animation and the amount of detail in that movie. It is just, even like within side characters, there's this great bar scene where Rango is in this bar, and there's just characters on the side, not even main characters, that you can easily forget. And there's like one that's like porcupine and stuff like that. And there's just so much detail in their design. I'm like, I just found myself just looking at the screen, just getting lost in the animation at times. It just had such a cool look to it that it wasn't anything really similar out there. It's also great at homaging classic films. Some of the homages are pretty obvious, and some aren't. I mean, you have touches of Road Warrior, you have touches of The Good, the Bad, and the Ugly. You have touches of, Chinatown. There's all these different little elements from classic films that are placed into it. It's like a movie lover's dream because it's done well, and the voice cast too is handled greatly. Like, I'm not the biggest Johnny Depp fan. When he's good, he's good. And in this, I think he makes his voice acting is superb, along with the other ones on the list too. The motion and like the action is fantastic. Some of the action scenes. There's amazing chase down this canyon that is very reminiscent of the chase in Road Warrior, and it is so well done. There's so much going on, and it's just, again, like, exciting, a lot of tension, and two, it's a really cool story and a really cool world that they build, and the characters are all unique. There's so much to it. I did not, like, I was so unexpectedly in love with Rango. It made my actual top 10 of that year overall. It was the only animated film to do that year. But it was one too that I find myself going back to again and again. So honestly forgot all about it when you talked about 2011. I'm like, I have no idea what that is, but yeah, Rango. I love that movie. I'm not gonna lie.
Top 60 worthy?
Yeah, I placed it higher. I believe I placed it either, I think, in my top 50 or my top 40. So I am perfectly okay where it is.
Steve, thoughts on Rango? I know you've seen it.
I like it. I did not put it on my list, but that's more so, again, it's a personal preference. I thought that the story was good, but it was kind of slow to me. I don't know why I found it that way. I don't know if it was because of some of the portrayals of how it was being laid out or anything, but I found at points I was getting bored with it. I
mean, it does move,
and also
it does move like a classic Western. The pacing is not necessarily what you expect for a children's cartoon. And that's one knock I would say about Rango, is I don't think kids would like it at all. I don't think there's anything appealing or any type of silly comedy that's going to appeal to kids. But also, if you're not a fan of that like classic Western pacing, I could see you getting bored, like Steve mentioned.
Yeah, I mean, it's not that it's bad or anything. I personally had a problem kind of keeping interested throughout, just because of that reason alone. And again, like I said, it's not bad. I find that it's at points. I mean, it's that, and it's another. I mean, it's Johnny Depp, but you can't really tell it's Johnny Depp. So that's one thing going for it. But yeah, I mean, that's pretty much all I got to say about it. I didn't personally list it on my list, but that's more so because of personal preference and because it's not one that I find to be rewatchable just because it's kind of calling back to that old era. But that's just on my own, on me. So
this is one that, like I said, I meant to watch. The year it came out, never got around to it. But like Dan said, something that comes up in the countdown like this that makes me remember it, makes me say, "Whoops, I need to go put this on a list of things to watch very soon." Because I'm definitely interested to see, especially based on what you guys are saying, how I would like it or not. But interesting to see that it comes in here at number 58. And then from here, we're gonna travel into some rare air, some territory that we don't go to very often with our next number.
57.
That's right. We're at number 57, and we're going to the 80s. We haven't been there very often, just barely going in to 1989. And the film that we're talking about in 1989, some people might be like, I just want to linger for a little bit because I know of some different films that came out in 1989, so I think some people are panicking, maybe not.
There's a box cover of a film in 89 that was very controversial.
But interesting enough, there was two films that were actually released to directly compete against each other in 1989. It's safe to say that this one was the loser out of that competition. Not saying that in a bad way about the movie, but number 57 is 1989's All Dogs Go to Heaven. From Don Bluth. I'll start here. As far as Bluth goes, I think it's kind of justified to talk a little bit about his films in general. And Sullivan Bluth Studios, the one that kind of produced some of the ones that most people would recognize or associate with Don Bluth. We had Secret of NIMH, and then American Tail, Land Before Time, and the next one in that chain was All Dogs Go to Heaven. And then for me, in my history of watching movies, that's kind of where I didn't realize he did anything after that. It was like almost like this was the turning point for that, and it just kind of went downhill from here. Stuff like Rockadoodle, A Troll in Central Park, The Pebble and the Penguin, Thumbelina. None of those to me stack up to Secret of NIMH, American Tail, Land Before Time. So this is kind of in that middle ground. It directly was competing against The Little Mermaid in 1989. I believe they came out either the same day or the same weekend, same month, or something like that. And we've talked about this before with animated films in our MWire Weekly show, as far as how long an animated film can stay in the top as far as box office goes if it doesn't have anything to compete against. But talk about going against a juggernaut. I remember All Dogs Go to Heaven. I remember somewhat enjoying it, but to me it didn't live up to the stuff that I was familiar with. As far as that studio goes, it didn't live up to what was going on in Disney at the time. So it kind of falls flat a little bit with me. I'm not surprised to see it in our countdown. Coming in at number 57 is fine. It was on 15 lists, which I don't know if we have seen anything that has been on that many lists. I think 14 for The Simpsons was the highest we've gotten. So 15 is the most lists so far that we've seen a film show up on. So it was a wide consensus that it should show up on a lot of people's top 100. Obviously, it wasn't ranked super high by a lot of people. It did get ranked all the way up to number 12 by one person. Rotten Tomato score is not good, 50. Dan, what's your thoughts on All Dogs Go to Heaven in comparison to the other Bluth films? And in kind of talking about that era, 1989 time period.
Well, I think this was probably the first Bluth film I really remember watching because, I mean, the Secret of NIMH and, well, Land Before Time, I should say, probably is the one that stands out above them all for me. When I was a kid, I did really like All Dogs Go to Heaven. There's, I don't know, something about it, some of the characters, the main dog, I don't remember any of the names because it's been a while, but I just remember finding the main dog kind of charming. The idea behind it, and when you think about it too, it's like it does kind of deal with some concepts that are pretty hard or pretty deep for a kids movie. You know, the idea of, you know, it, even though it's within the title, the idea of death, especially with when it comes to like pets, because when you think about it, pets are often a tool we use to teach kids about death and how to kind of come to grips with it and things of that nature. So placing it within a cartoon concept, I think as a kid of that age, think it worked for me. If I went back and watched it as an adult, maybe I wouldn't think so highly of it, but I do think it's a good lead into some of that stuff. And I do remember liking the story. I don't remember like any of the songs or anything like that, if there were any songs, but I do too remember it being kind of a very sad movie, obviously, just by the title of it. It's not the most uplifting. I guess you can say All Dogs Go to Heaven is somewhat uplifting. It's better than like Some Dogs Go to Heaven or A Couple Dogs Go to Heaven or, you know, or All Puppies Go to Hell. That might be a different type of movie. But I did like it. Is it nearly as good as Blue's best stuff? No, I don't think so. But it's, you know, it's a decent film. It's well told. And I do applaud people when they go to, you know, attempt a concept that maybe isn't, it's a little bit rough around the edges, and I do appreciate that.
So I recently rewatched this, and it's still as depressing as I remember it being as a kid. All Dogs Go to Heaven. I think I liked the plot better when I saw Robert Downey Jr. do it in Chances Are. It's basically a dog gets killed, goes to heaven, comes back, and exacts his revenge, where the difference is in Chances Are, Downey Jr. is trying to get his life back. Yes, Dan, there was a soundtrack. Burt Reynolds actually did sing a couple of this. Actually, there's a duet between Reynolds and Dom DeLuise, You Can't Keep a Good Dog Down. But yeah, I don't care for this movie at all. I would never show this to my child. It's too depressing.
I mean, I think Dan has some points there with.
He does. I'm not saying he doesn't. I'm just saying that for me, this film is just way too depressing.
I'm just still picturing somebody from like Comedy Central or South Park or some other place hearing all the different titles that Dan just rattled off a little bit ago and coming up with some type of new spoof film.
Yeah.
One Dog Goes to Heaven or something like that. Or a horror film with All Puppies Go to Hell. So many options there. I mean, I think there's some value in the kind of the lessons that you can piggyback this with as a kid's watching it. For me, at the time, it just didn't resonate to me as a child. Steve, what was your reaction to All Dogs Go to Heaven?
I mean, I kind of agree with what everybody's already said of it. I mean, it doesn't really resonate with me now, and it didn't back then either. I mean, it's kind of another one of those kind of animal films, but I don't think it's as memorable as some other ones that have already made the countdown.
But like I said, interesting. I don't want it to seem like we're completely poo-pooing on this film because it did make 15 of the 20 list. So it was a general consensus that this does deserve to be within a top 100. Obviously, people had it at different spots. It's coming in close to the middle at number 57. So we'll have to see on the website and whatnot people's reactions to All Dogs Go to Heaven, and if there's a general love of the film or what do people think, and do they think we got it right here at number 57, and will we get it right with our next selection?
56.
I mean, no one's tired of the 90s, are they?
Nah. Why should we be?
Let's just go right back from 1989, get out of the 80s again, go about a little less than 10 years later to 1997. 1997 for number 56 in our top 100. Interesting selection here. I did not actually expect this to make our top 100, and it's ranked pretty darn high. Number 56 is the film Anastasia from Blue Sky and Fox. On 9 lists, it was all the way up to number 8 on one person's list. Actually, Rotten Tomatoes gives it a fairly nice score of 86. This one is interesting. Anastasia, it was that time when Fox Animation Studios, just a very brief time where they put out a few films. They put out Anastasia, Bartok, The Magnificent, and Titan AE. And this was the first one with that segment of I guess Fox Animation Studios, you could call it. I think I thought this was a Disney film at first when I was a kid, and when I just saw the cover for it and saw the promotional or the marketing stuff for it, I guess I just like somehow associated it with Disney, even though it wasn't a Disney film. Directed by Don Bluth, so I guess there's connections between our last two on the countdown here. I don't know. Interesting. Like I said, I'm somewhat surprised that it made the list. Somewhat even more surprised that it's all the way up at number 56. Mike, have you seen Anastasia?
Oh yeah.
Okay, well you can go first.
Meg Ryan and John Cusack is starring in it.
Well, Kelsey Grammer, Christopher Lloyd, Bernadette Peters, Angela Lansbury. I mean, Hank Azaria. There is a cast right there.
No, it's a star-studded cast. It really, really is. It's kind of hard for me to picture and hear Hank Azaria as Bartok and also hear him as Apu from The Simpsons. But yeah, I mean,
Kirsten Dunst too, by the way.
Yeah, Kirsten Dunst was the younger version, and Meg Ryan was the older version of Anastasia. Actually, the funny thing is about this, I actually first saw this, I think, in high school, in history class. My history teacher was very eccentric. He used this as to inform us of the Russian czars and all that stuff after it came out on VHS.
You went to public school?
Yeah.
Hopefully picked out all the inaccuracies of it, because that'd be important.
Well, right. I'm not saying that that was kind of the point. He was teaching us what was inaccurate about it compared to the actual events that actually happened. But like, that's the first time I remember seeing it, and I really enjoy it for what it is.
How does it rank against the other late 90s Disney stuff that we've been talking about? I know it's not Disney, but how does it, I mean, it was coming in competition with that era of Disney. Is it better than all that Disney stuff? Is it in the same vein? Is it worse?
I would say it's kind of in the same vein. I mean, really, this is technically a Russian version of Cinderella, is really what this is. But I mean, I like it. I still enjoy it. I haven't seen it recently, but I do remember really, really enjoying the film. As far as how it ranks up with all the other ones, I don't know. That honestly is a personal preference. It's going to have to rely on the individual.
Steve, have you seen this one?
Yeah, it's been a while since I've seen it, but I don't recall even really caring for it though. I too thought it was a Disney film. I will be honest about that. It looked like something Disney would have produced around that time. So I say kudos to that for trying to be a Disney knockoff. But I mean, besides the cast that it has on there, I don't know. I didn't really care for it all that much. I don't know if it goes back to my other, previous kind of thoughts on things taking place elsewhere. Even though I know the film was made here, it is one of those kind of preconditions when I watch something, I just kind of don't care.
It was actually Don Bluth's highest grossing film up to that point. Had a couple Academy Award nominations. Stuff I didn't know about that. Dan, you've been silent so far about Anastasia. What are your thoughts?
I'm like super shocked it's up this high. Honestly, I didn't. By this point, I just figured it would not be on the list at all. I was never a huge fan of Anastasia. Part of it could be because when it came out, I was 12, 13 years old, and the idea of watching a cartoon about a princess may have been something too kiddie for me at the time. But part of it too is I always felt it was a pale comparison to the Disney stuff. It always felt, like the generic version of a Disney movie. Like if you go to the toy shelves and there's like the G.I. Joe and then like the generic G.I. Joe soldiers that they're just like missing arms and legs and just not exactly the same thing. And this is what it reminded me of. It just lacked the personality and it was kind of dry. I always felt it just didn't have that special aspect of a Disney movie. Maybe it was just because of it had a different look to it, but I don't know. It was never one that I had a fond affection for. But to be fair, I have not watched it within the last 5 years or so. So maybe as an adult, removed from the eyes of a teenager, I could see that it's much better than I'm giving it credit for. But from what I can remember, I just remember finding it kind of boring and not very interesting.
I'm definitely interested to see All Are fans or listeners, etc., reaction to the last two films and to see what they think about All Dogs Go to Heaven and Anastasia and how they think they rank, and are we crazy putting them in the 50s or not. There's not very many spots left on this side of 50. We're only 5 more films to go before we hit that halfway point, so we'll see what these last 5 films have in store for us.
55.
Well, like I said in the intro, we have not been to this decade hardly at all so far, but number 55 is going to take us there one more time. We're going all the way back to 1973, and the movie is from Hanna-Barbera and Paramount Pictures, and that film is none other than the animated version, Charlotte's Web. It was on 12 lists out of the 20, got a highly ranked by one individual all the way up to number 8, 75 on Rotten Tomatoes. Charlotte's Web is an interesting one. Interested to see what you guys think about this one. Like I said, we haven't been to the 70s very often. I ended with you last time. Let's start with you this time, Dan. What's your opinions on the animated version of Charlotte's Web making the countdown? Are you surprised, like you were with Anastasia, that we're talking about it in our top 100?
Oh, not at all. I felt like Charlotte's Web, the cartoon, is like a rites of passage as a kid. I'm like Charlotte's Web and like James the Giant Peach are 2 movies or 2 books I loved as a kid, and I actually felt the books did them justice, or the movies did them justice. I'm gonna have them flip flop there. I think part of it was that I think it was a short film. It wasn't. I think the running time in that is like 65, 75 minutes. It's not very long, but it gets the essence of that story, and it's such like a sweet, small story of just a pig becoming a friend with a spider, and it's just, I don't know. It was always something about that story that is just heartwarming. I don't know, maybe because it's pigs. I hate spiders, but Charlotte's Web makes me like spiders, so that's impressive. But yeah, like as a kid, it's a movie I adore, and like I said, I think it's one that is pretty timeless. Though it was made in 1973, I do feel like it holds up really well, and you could show it to kids today, and it will not feel dated. There's something timeless about it, so I definitely would think it deserves a spot.
I can't agree with you more about it. It just seemed like a rite of passage. Just one of those films that just in school we watched. It was like you watched Willy Wonka and the Chocolate Factory. You watched Charlotte's Web. There was just a few of those things that it seemed like no matter where you were, you watched these films. Just for a quick second, some of the voice cast, some pretty famous people. You have Don Messick in there. You have John Stevenson in there. Paul Lynde and Henry Gibson, which some people might not recognize those names. But Henry Gibson has just an iconic voice. Just a real classic voice actor. And he was the voice of Wilbur in this. So definitely some coolness there. And Paul Lynde, who was the voice of Mildew Wolf, or the Hooded Claw from Perils of Penelope Pitstop, he was Templeton. So you just have some really classic voice acting being included in this. Like you said, it's not a very long film, and I don't like spiders either, but I really enjoy this film. I think it's just a complete classic film. Mike, what do you think about this?
I've always liked Charlotte's Web. Like you guys said, this is another one of those ones where, we have a free, there's sometimes in school where you have free periods or where they schedule rewards for a certain class or whatever else. And this is always one of the ones that they showed in school to us, along with stuff like you guys already mentioned, Willy Wonka and all that. And another one I remember watching almost back to back with this one was Trumpet of the Swan. But this one, it has great characters. It has amazing voice actors. The animation is interesting. There's just not enough good things you can say about it.
Steve, Charlotte's Web, 1973.
I'm actually in the same agreement as you guys, so I have nothing more to add.
All right, so a rare appearance of a 1970s film. I think it's time to go back to familiar territory after that, though.
54.
Honestly, are there any more films that came out in the late 90s that we have not talked about? We got to run out of films eventually, especially films done by Disney in the late 90s. There's only one left, I think, that we could possibly be talking about. It comes in here at number 54. And we briefly mentioned it when we were talking about Mulan earlier. That is 1997's Hercules. On 9 lists, got ranked as high as number 7. 534 points. I only bring that up because the last 3 films have only been separated by 1 point. Anastasia had 532, Charlotte's Web 533, and now Hercules 534. I guess just in comparison to Mulan, since it's the other one we talked about in this particular episode, is it right ranking Hercules higher than Mulan, or do they belong in the same episode like they have been appearing right here? Should we be done now with this chapter of the countdown, Dan?
I kind of hope so. I can't think of anything else Disney related unless it's like Brother Bear, and I hope to God that's not any higher than this. Because that's just a bad movie. Hercules compared to Mulan, they're very different. I mean, they're going for very different things. Hercules is more of a comedy, but, it's more of a farcical type of approach, while Mulan's far more serious. Yes, it has comedic aspects, but it's more of an epic tale. I guess you can say that about Hercules too. But I remember Hercules, for some reason, in the late 90s was huge with the TV show, and it was just big at the time. I don't know if this came out before, during, or after, but I remember finding Hercules very funny. I had, George Costanza, I can't think of his real name. James Woods as Hercules, or as Hades. I thought he was very funny. He had a very great dry delivery. And there are funny moments here and there. Do I think it's as, I would probably put Mulan higher because it's just more of an epic tale and it's overall a better movie. But I'm hoping we can finally take a step away from the 90s Disney and wait for a little bit, because there's a few more movies that we should talk about, but they should be, not for a few episodes.
Yeah, Hercules the film came before the animated series. They did the animated series after the film was released.
I'm talking about the TV show, the Kevin Sorbo as Hercules.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I was thinking of the animated show. But Hercules, no matter whether, you're listening to a Nutty Professor or watching Kevin Sorbo or watching this film, has always been around in media. This movie is not one. This is one of those Disney ones where I'm kind of on the same page as you, Kev. I was just like, okay, sure. I mean, it's great that Danny DeVito does a voice, and it's great that James Woods does a voice. And I actually, where I really got to enjoy the Hercules characters was in the video game Kingdom Hearts. But the film, it's okay. It's nothing that we haven't seen before.
Steve, you're a big Disney fan. How does this one rank amongst Disney of this era?
I find this film to be the most enjoyable out of all of them to me. So far, I remember watching this back in school. I took Latin class, and so the Hercules was a part of the big mythos of ancient Greek, Roman mythology, all that kind of stuff. So I rather enjoy the film. I know it's the typical, bringing, the character up from nothing and into a hero kind of thing. I mean, it happens with any kind of superhero. So, but I found the music to be enjoyable. I found the voice acting, the character portrayals, like everything in the film, the animation. I found a lot of it to be rather interesting how they did everything. So I find that to be one of the few Disney films, next to like Aladdin or a few other ones that haven't shown up yet. I kind of lump Pixar in there too, but I find it to be enjoyable to the point I can watch it over and over and it doesn't bother me.
All right, so possibly the best of the 90s era, or maybe not. Well, I guess, again, we're looking for feedback, something we'll talk about in the wrap-up show with how we ranked all these Disney films, assuming that there's not one that's going to sneak in there. But, hey, maybe Brother Bear comes back to bite us.
Let's hope not. Before we move on, I just want to bring this up because Dan asked, The TV series ran from 95 to 99. Another interesting note about Hercules, the movie, and the voice of Hercules in the film, Tate Donovan, as well as Kevin Sorbo, they actually crossed paths about 10 years later in the OC show on Fox. Sorbo was Frank Atwood, and Tate Donovan was the star as one of the OC wives, husbands, etc. So that's interesting. But yeah, this happened right in the middle of the Hercules live action show.
Well, Dan mentioned also that, and we all kind of mentioned that maybe this was the end of the Disney chapter, maybe the end of the late 90s films chapter. Well, if that is the case, what does that leave the door open for? It has been so far 32 spots on our countdown without an anime film. It has been 47, all 47 spots without a film predating 1970. It's also been 47 spots so far without a Pixar film. So maybe the closing of the Disney chapter opens up something for that. We'll have to see.
53.
Well, all those numbers you just heard me rattle off, I guess you'll have to add one to all of them because we're not going to break any of those streaks at this point quite yet. Number 53, we're going to go to the year 2009. Interesting to see what people's reaction to for this one. I'm assuming positive from a couple people at least. Number 53 from 2009, the movie is Fantastic Mr. Fox. Another Blue Sky Aardman picture, which we've had a few of those with mixed reactions. It was on 9 people's list. It was all the way up to number 3 on one person's list. Rotten Tomato, excellent score, 93. Dan, I know we usually got the most from you on the Aardman films. How do you feel Fantastic Mr. Fox coming in at number 53 and in comparison to the other films?
I think this should be much, much higher. Honestly, I love I would say top 25, top 30 at the least. Being directed by Wes Anderson, it has the sensibilities similar to it. It takes a Roald Dahl film or a book and opens it up and adds in some extra layers, and the animation is fantastic. There's so much personality. There's so much of the Wes Anderson-ness to it that it just works well. Wes Anderson always has this kind of play set type of directorial style, and it's similar and it works in this stop motion animation world. His movies on a way almost feel like live action stop motion animation, just in how kind of not cartoony, but just in how sporadic his characters act at times. But I love Fantastic Mr. Fox. I think it's really clever. The dialogue is sharp. The voice cast is just outstanding. George Clooney as Mr. Fox, Bill Murray, the normal players that you get in a Wes Anderson film, they all work really well. Again, it's similar to Rango. I could see it not working for kids because a lot of the jokes aren't necessarily aimed at kids, but I think that's okay. And two, I don't know. To me, I was blown away by Fantastic Mr. Fox. Again, similar to Rango. One, I didn't put much stock into, but when I watched it, I just was immersed into the world that he created, and I just loved every moment of it. So,
what about in comparison to the other ones we've seen? We've seen Wallace and Gromit, Curse of the Were-Rabbit. We've seen Chicken Run. A couple of people have mentioned when we were talking about those, Flushed Away. How does it compare to those? I
think it's better than all of them because what you're doing is you're combining Aardman's style with stop motion animation with Wes Anderson's directorial style and hit some of the top notch actors, and I think that combination, that amalgamation, yields awesome results. So I would put it above all of those. Probably Chicken Run a close second, and I do love Wallace and Gromit, but I think their shorts are probably better than their full feature length films. But I would put it, is this ranking is higher than all of those? I think it's probably correct because I don't think there's any Aardman films that are going to rank any higher from what I can think of. But I've been wrong before. But I do agree that it is superior to those.
Steve, you haven't been a big fan of the other Aardman films that we've talked about during the countdown. Does that continue with Fantastic Mr. Fox?
Yeah, I attempted to watch it. I just again, it comes down to I can't stand the voicing was American, yes, but that didn't managed to pull me in. The animation again throws me. I couldn't get into it, so it's not on my list.
All right, well, Fantastic Fox, Mr. Fox at number 53, and we are running out of spots on this side of 50. There's only 2 more spots, and then we will be at our top 50 mark. So let's see who takes those 2 spots.
52.
It is time for one of the streaks we before mentioned to end finally here at number 52. One of the streaks is coming to an end. Coming in at number 52, the film is from 1996. Wait, 1996? How is that ending any streaks? Because it's not from Disney. The film is Ghost in the Shell. It was on 9 people's list, got ranked all the way up to number 9, got a Rotten Tomatoes score of 94, and the anime curse has been lifted. Dan, Ghost in the Shell, number 52.
I do think this is one that may you may see some reckoning for this, because it's probably a lot lower than it should be. Ghost in the Shell is an excellent film. It's so influential in the anime world. A lot of the ideas it goes after. I mean, you could link even like cinematic films like The Matrix or other movies really took a lot from Ghost in the Shell. The action is fantastic. The animation is second to none at this time. I know some people, I think, even like the sequel better. I'm not an aficionado when it comes to animation or anime by any means, but I know I have watched a good deal of them, and I do think Ghost in the Shell obviously is one of the best. When you look at like Ghost in the Shell compared to other action animation coming out, even like within the United States, you just realize how behind we were in certain aspects of it. They were just going after concepts that were so much, more adult and so much more developed than what we were going after. But it's been a little bit since I've seen it, but I just remember just the amount of blood shocking me, and the combination of using a lot of technology and how that advanced the animation. But I would say glad to see another anime movie, but I do think we may get some complaints that it's not high enough. As you can see, just looking at the amount of people that did rank it seemed to rank it pretty high. So again, part of that maybe some people haven't had the opportunity to see it.
Yeah, I mean, if you just took the people that had it on its list, it was closer to, in the top 20 range. So you don't think people are going to give us a pass or forgive us just because at least for the first time in almost 34 films we're talking about anime?
Are you kidding me? We better run and duck for cover. I'm telling you, every anime fan I know is going to jump on this website, jump on the site, and just say you guys are nuts for ranking.
I understand that. I do want to put this out there though before you continue. I do want to put it out there because I think what we've noticed overall is doing these lists is, okay, you have people who are just general fans of everything and who are well-rounded, like Dan, who are exposed to a lot of different things. You have some people that are turned off to certain things. But then you have the anime fan, and I'm not trying to throw them under the bus or anything. But if you are a diehard anime fan, the thing is to automatically, whatever is your favorite anime or whatever is, in your top 5 or whatever, for the people I've come across, in their mind, then that should transfer as also the top 5 films just in general. Because they're so diehard into anime that whatever ranks high with them should be ranked high overall. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's what we've seen. So anytime we rank anything that's not, that's somebody's favorite anime and we don't put it in our top, 3, 4, 5, we do catch hell. So yes, I fully expect to see that.
Pretty sure, because it's not in at least the top 20, we're going to catch a lot of hell for Ghost in the Shell being at this
a lot higher than the last anime film was.
That's true, but still.
And one thing to consider is, like Kevin mentioned, the people that, like, I ranked this, I don't know the exact spot, but I ranked it, I'm pretty sure within the top 25. And the people that did rank it were, did all seem to rank it within that range, within the top 20. Which shows you that, you have to also consider that we have, 20 to 30 people doing this list. And some of those films, like, yes, Ghost in the Shell is influential without a doubt, but some of the people who have not had the opportunity to see it, not everyone is a fan of that style by any means. That's why I think we're seeing more of those, general, those movies that have more of a broad appeal on this list. But the fact that it A, made the list is really great, and 2, if it's too low, yes, we can admit that, but I'm just happy that we're not talking about Disney.
Well, my point is that think about what this just backed up against with Fantastic Mr. Fox. All right, a lot of people that enjoy the animation style of Fantastic Mr. Fox admitted yourself that you would put that ahead of all of that other type of animation. The difference is people in that circle, or people that are diehard fans of something like Fantastic Mr. Fox, don't seem to be as vocal about, they would put that as the top part of that animation, but they don't give it, you know what I mean? They're not going to be as vocal of, we don't have it in our top 5. Whereas diehard anime fans are going to be up in arms with Ghost in the Shell appearing, even though it's literally back to back with another unique animation style type thing that are both coming in 53, 52. So I think we'll get more comments about Ghost in the Shell than Fantastic Mr. Fox. Maybe I'll be wrong.
Yeah, I could see that, because anime, I think part of it is that they feel like animation or anime in general is not well respected. Overall, just, if you look at something like the Oscars, very rarely are you seeing an anime film nominated. And I think part of that is what they're ready to pounce to begin with. So, when you give them something to pounce on, they're just, ready, willing, and able. And we're providing plenty of opportunity. But like we mentioned, we'll recognize when something should be higher and when it should be, but also consider the fact that it made a list and it's deserving. So
the only thing that you can do to incur more wrath in the world of fandoms is to say something bad about My Little Pony. Anyway, Steve, any thoughts on Ghost in the Shell coming in at number 52?
I definitely will recognize what it is and the fact that it's important, and it's important to anime fans. I myself have not seen it, therefore I did not vote on it. But I do know of the film and all of the mass appeal for it from diehard anime fans. It's actually one that I've been meaning to get to. I just haven't had the time or the access. So it's not that I'm saying anything bad against it, but I definitely can see it warranted being on a top 100 list.
Yeah, I definitely think it deserves a spot in the top 100. I can't say an accurate number of where I think it should fit, but I'm glad that it's made the countdown. So let's keep the discussion continue. Good Lord, I'm going to have to edit that. Edit point. Let's keep the discussion moving here with our last spot before we get to the top 50.
51.
All right. That's right. We're ready for number 51. The last film not to make our top 50 list is from 1988, going back to the 80s. And also going back to another anime film. The film is My Neighbor Totoro. I probably said that wrong. Dan, I think you were expecting to see this at some point. You are the person I'm leaning on here. Start us off with this film here. It was on 8 people's list. It's got all the way up to number 7 as far as high as it was ranked. Rotten Tomatoes score of 92, and it was generally ranked within the 30 to 25 range.
Well, we just doubled down in anime, so that's impressive. My Neighbor Totoro is excellent. I mean, it's Matsuki and excellence kind of are synonymous with one another. Again, not one of my personal favorites, but it is one of the best family films I think I've ever seen. Matsuki creates so many, with his writers and his animators, creates so many interesting characters and so a world that is just so unique and interesting to play in. And it really gets into within My Neighbor Totoro, the idea of friendship and all these different themes that are, I think, appealing to those that are younger as well as adults. Because when you see with a lot of cartoons is that, maybe boys will like it or girls will like it or young kids or adults, like I talked about with Fantastic Mr. Fox is in Rango. I don't see kids enjoying those at all. My Neighbor Totoro is something you could watch. It's that cliche of something you can watch with an entire family and they're all going to enjoy it. And you can say that with most Matsuki films, but I think Totoro is, I'm probably saying it wrong too. I barely can pronounce English correctly, let alone something like that. But it's something that you can literally watch with the entire family, and everyone from your youngest to your teenage son we get something out of it. There's a lot of silly comedy, some great tension. I love the cat bus type of design. It's kind of psychedelic in with some of the characters, but yeah, a great movie. Again, similar to Ghost in the Shell, probably should be a little bit higher. Glad to see more Matsuki, and it's not my favorite. My favorite has not been on the list yet. It's not, and also one I ranked the highest hasn't been on the list yet, so I'm hoping they're still there. But if you have not seen it, I think it's a good starter film for Matsuki, because it's not as hard to get into as something like Spirited Away, which is far more, maybe a little bit more out there than My Neighbor Totoro, which is rather simple story, but it's told well.
Steve, any thoughts?
I've heard of it, but never cared to actually watch it.
All right, and we know Mike has not seen it, so we will just pass right along that. So that is the top 50, or the top half of the 50 here. Interesting to see a couple things. We've had, like you said, double down on the anime here. We've had 2 animes in a row, so that curse has apparently been lifted. But we have gone through our first half, the first set of 50, with no films before 1970, no films from Pixar. We think we may have closed a chapter on Disney in the late 90s, but I guess we'll have to see. From here on out, remember, every film that we list will have appeared at least on half of the submitted list. At least 10 people voted on all the films you will hear from this point forward. And it's time to get serious. It's time to get into our top 50.
50.
I mean, some may say it's a conspiracy for me just not to let Mike talk at all the rest of the podcast. But moving into our top 50 here, at number 50, we didn't just double down, we tripled down, I guess, on anime. 2005's film, Howl's Moving Castle. It was on 11 people's list. It was ranked 11 as the highest it got, 86 Rotten Tomato score. Most people had this actually a little bit differently. It was just that it was on more people's list. So more people had it closer to where we're ranking it here at number 50. And as I have with the last two, we'll start with Dan as far as Howl's Moving Castle, and in comparison, going Ghost in the Shell, then My Neighbor Totoro, and then Howl's Moving Castle. This one actually, Ghost in the Shell and My Neighbor Totoro were only a couple points away. This was a good 13 points ahead of those other two. So we kind of jumped a little bit into the 569 point range. Dan, what are your thoughts on those three in consecutive order?
I would say very different. I mean, very different and different styles. I would say of all those three, Ghost in the Shell is, I think, the Ghost in the Shell and Totoro are very similar, very neck and neck. But I like Howl's Moving Castle. I think it is lesser Matsuki. I don't think it is as his top echelon as other ideas. I think it gets at similar themes and similar. The framework is similar to films he's done better. The story basically is that of, this character Howl, and he has this moving castle, obviously, but it's an interesting idea. Like, he can open the door into different parts of the world. There's some mystical elements. I remember too, one of the weirdest things about it in the American version is there's like a talking fire, and the person voicing the talking fire is Billy Crystal. It's just odd. And Christian Bale's in the voice cast as well. In the American voice cast, obviously. So it is, you have that, which is, I think, a good reason why sometimes an American dub version can be off-putting when you have like Billy Crystal on it. It just doesn't feel right. It just I don't know. His voice just didn't work for what's going on, but I do like it. The animation is pretty spot on. The use of the castle, and it's very CGI. And I usually don't like when they use like computer graphics within standard animation, but it's one of the few times when it's done well. But yeah, like I said, it's good Matsuki. It's not great. I would probably put this a lot lower. I would rank it higher than like Kiki's Delivery Service, but it's nowhere near the level as My Neighbor or Ghost in the Shell.
So is it more that just it's more, maybe not, like I said, it wasn't ranked as high on average as those other two, but it was ranked by more people.
And maybe because it's more recent, I think Matsuki after Spirited Away had a huge influx in the United States, so maybe some people haven't had the opportunity to see something like Totoro or Ghost in the Shell. So I think that's probably what you're seeing. It's just that, in fact, that you have the cast that's doing it, that's doing the voices, or more stars of today that we're aware of. So I think that's part of it too.
All right, well, I just want to check in on Mike, make sure he's still alive. Mike, are you enjoying the countdown at this point?
It's all right. See, this is why I haven't, you mentioned in the intro to this podcast, you mentioned the poll on the website. This is exactly why I haven't voted yet.
I don't know what that means exactly. Steve, any thoughts on the triple shot of anime here?
Again, don't care.
I am glad to see at least some anime represented after going almost 30 plus spots without it. Like I said, the curse has been lifted off of the anime genre. Let's see if we can lift it off of something else here as we move into our next spot.
49.
Oh, the foreshadowing. Number 49. We've broken the anime curse in a big way by going 3 animes in a row. And now that we are moving away from anime, it's time to break another streak. For the first time in the countdown, number 49 gives us the first film to predate 1970. It is 1963 film from Disney. Interesting here. I did not know where this would fall, if it would fall at all in our top 100, but number 49 gives us Sword in the Stone. It was on 11 people's lists. Got all the way up to number 5 on some people, Rotten Tomatoes 71. Most people rank this between 47 up to about 70, give or take. Not one of my particular favorite Disney films. I would not have been surprised to see it not make our top 100 list. The fact that it beat some of the other Disney films for me, I don't know how I feel about it, but I know a lot of people love it. It's the first film to predate 1970. Mike, you haven't talked in a while about an actual film. Sword in the Stone coming in at number 49 in our top 50.
I agree with it. I think this is a really, really good... this is like someone you want to, this is something you want to show your kids to teach them about the Arthurian legend, regardless of if it's a more fantasy-based version of the Arthurian legend. It does get a lot of things right. It does get a few things wrong. Obviously, there was no talking owl. But who knows? Merlin was a magician. The animation is great. The songs are catchy as hell. The story is great. The comedy between Merlin and Mim is awesome. Just everything about the movie. It's one of my favorite all-time Disney movies.
For me, it's just not what I think about when I think of Disney. I mean, I know it's Disney, and I never have thought it was something else. It just doesn't have that classic Disney feel. It doesn't have the voice, any of the voices that we're used to, really. Outside of, like the Earl Ravenscraft, I guess, and then James McDonald in a way, but they're not necessarily major players. It just doesn't feel Disney to me like some of those other ones do. Madam Mim saves it a little bit for me. Steve, what's your thoughts on Sword of the Stone? Mike's obviously a big endorser of it being in our top 50. How do you feel?
I actually really like that film. That's actually one of the very few early Disney films that I can actually stand to watch. I like the whole Merlin thing. I like the all the magic influx in the film. So I mean, I definitely see it being one of the films, even especially from that era, that deserves to be in the top 100.
Dan, thoughts on Sword in the Stone coming in our top 50?
Surprised it's up this high. I remember for some reason Sword in the Stone. I just remember that as a kid always being on Saturday afternoons, and when I would watch it, it always would be that scene between Merlin and the One Witch when they were like changing into different elements and different animals and everything back and forth until like he finally turned into a germ or something like that. I don't know. Like I feel like I've watched that scene time and time again. But besides that, it's fine. Like I'm more on your side, Kevin, where I think it's a decent Disney movie. It's not nowhere near their bottom, not nowhere near like their worst, but it's not necessarily one that I wouldn't rank it higher than Milan or higher, probably even higher than like Hercules. I think it's okay. It's not. It's one that I don't know. Like it's like certain scenes stick out to me, but this I think it's more so because I've watched it so many times, not more so because of their overall quality.
Yeah, I'm just a little surprised. I don't know. I guess I would rank Aristocats higher than it, but that's just my personal preference. But I can understand the love for it. Happy to see something that's prior to 1970 show up. We talked about possibly opening up a can of worms back at number 52 when we talked about Ghost in the Shell. I think we're about to open up another can of worms with our next entry.
48.
All right, it's time for number 48 in our countdown. I'm sure there will be plenty of conversation here. It is also the first film to break the 600-point mark. Remember, out of 2000, we have now gone past 600. We're at 627, actually, so it's a good 40-point jump from Sword in the Stone. It was on 10 people's lists, as highly ranked as number 3. It is the 1986 film Transformers the Movie.
Mike? Nobody can give a shit for this.
We have rectified our error in the animated series list, maybe. Or does ranking this in our top 50 not save us? I don't know. Obviously, Hasbro, Marvel, Sunbow, whoever you want to give full credit to that. Mike, you had it ranked higher than anybody else. And I'm not going to even say. I mean, I said it before. You had it ranked number 3.
Number 3. Yeah, that's right. I take ownership.
So you did not learn from ranking.
I don't care. Okay. Explain your math again.
No, I'm just saying we talked about ranking the series number 3.
But if you look at it, if you look at the film without looking at the film's flaws, if you look at what the animation is, if you don't pick it apart and see, even though Ironhide died in this scene, he's floating across the battlefield in this scene. If you don't look at it in that way and you just look at it as an animation marvel, which it is, because it was the animation, while it was close to what the show was doing, it was so much better because this is the first Transformers film that was in theaters. Probably should have been the only Transformers film that was in theaters. But, the characters, sure, they kill off half of the season 1, 2 characters in the beginning to set up all the new characters. But the way the story flows, the voice acting, the music, I mean...
It doesn't matter what you say. It doesn't matter what
yes, it does.
Say.
I don't care.
I totally. I think this is. You didn't even bring up the biggest thing that this movie has going for it. And again,
you didn't give me a chance.
Well, hold on. I know.
Sure.
I'm just saying. A lot of people are going to stop listening at this point because they know we're Transformers fans, so they're just going to write us all off as that. But just the whole fact that it killed a cartoon character or multiple cartoon characters was something that most of American children had never seen before. So in that respect, it's somewhat groundbreaking. I love the film. I would not rank it number 3 as you did, but being in our top 100, I don't think is a mistake. People will give us crap no matter where we put it in our top 100, but I think it deserves a spot somewhere. Dan, before we get back to Mike, because I know he has more to say, and before we give Steve a chance, what's your thoughts?
Well, I'll preface by saying I'm probably the only one on this record that's not a big Transformers fan. It never really hit me as a kid. The only Transformers really I ever really enjoyed were the Beast Wars. Mike was talking about, if you don't look at this, you don't look at that, it's a good movie. And yeah, I think if you look at it half drunk with a concussion, with one eye closed while the TV screen is off, it's a good movie. But besides that, I don't like Transformers the movie nearly at all. I mean, I did rank it because I do recognize its place in history, and I do give it credit for killing a character, which is pretty ballsy. But some would say that it stole that idea as G.I. Joe was being created, and they were going to do that first or whatnot. But
actually, no, Transformers killed off Optimus Prime. G.I. Joe was gonna kill Duke, and then they looked at the reaction to what this movie did, and they said, "Oh no, we can't kill Duke."
Right, he's saying which one had it first in the plans, though.
Yeah, listening to the commentary before I was getting ready for this, I listened to the commentary for the G.I. Joe movie, which is I think probably worse than Transformers, but they mentioned that they were in development of coming up with the idea, and then magically Transformers came up with it too. But besides the point, they still did it. Give them credit. Yeah, I think the songs are fine on their own, but I don't think they at all match with what's on screen. I don't think they totally make sense with anything that's going on. I don't. The plot to me is just.
What movie are you watching? You have no idea what the hell you're talking about at all.
I do know what I'm talking.
I'm sorry, you don't.
Let him talk.
When I was watching it, like for the first time since I was a kid, I thought I was watching the fan edit. I'm like, why are they placing these songs the way they are? They don't match what's going on screen at all. The tonality of what they're trying to emote from the characters compared to what the songs are going after are two completely different things for much of the movie. I don't know. I know I'm ranking really being very harsh on it. I don't see it as nearly as higher rank as maybe you guys do. Part of that maybe is because I don't have that nostalgia glasses of being a Transformers fan. But part of it is too, I just don't think if you remove your love for Transformers and just look at it as a movie by itself, I don't think it's very good. I'm not going to lie.
This is better than any of the other Transformer films that have come out to date.
Which is not saying much, let's be honest.
Well, I'm not going to disagree with you, but this film is not bad by any means. I will agree that some of the musical track doesn't exactly line up with what's going on screen. There are a few, like Dare to Be Stupid, it happens on Junkion, where everything's kind of just AWOL. It's crazy. And a lot of stupid crap happens while it's there. But that film not only has a battle of odds and evolution in the Transformers mythos, and yes, it was an overglorified toy catalog commercial. Out with the old, in with the new. And then you have the last performance of Orson Welles. So I mean, overall that film is not bad. It's infinitely better than the series. The animation, yes, I will give you that some of the animation in places are badly flubbed, like with bulging eyeballs or some goofy stuff that happens in the animation, or miscolorings, or all of a sudden somebody who's dead magically reappears or disappears again. Yeah, some of that happens in the animation, but I mean, exactly what didn't have that during the 80s? But the voice cast is stellar. The plot of the story is good. It made a hell of a lot more sense than G.I. Joe, which was trying to do the same thing but failed terribly, which is why it never went to theater. But again, this film deserves to be in the top 50. I wouldn't say number 3, but I mean, because I put it in my top 40, but because I had other films that I thought should go above it, but I would not discount that this film is not deserving of being where it's at.
Most people that ranked it between 40 and 70. And like I said, it was on half the list, and I want to make sure that we're very clear here. This is not just Geekcast Radio people. This is not just the people that did a Transformers podcast, etc. This is 10 people out of all the different people that have nothing to do with Transformers. 10 of them thought that it should be somewhere in the top 100. Me personally, I don't necessarily see the music stuff as much as Dan does, maybe.
Because he's a film snob.
I don't think so.
Yeah, I will agree with Steve. The only song that really doesn't fit is Dare to Be Stupid, because they were partying it up and everything else. But if you look at Touch, if you look at Dare, those two songs, one is a theme for Optimus, the other is a theme for Hot Rod.
Touch and Dare and Dare to Be Stupid actually fit. It's the rest of them that don't. It's not, that's just as far as the regular soundtrack of musical parts. The Vince DiCola stuff is awesome. Like in the
that
background.
stuff definitely fits.
But again, it's I come from growing up on Beast Wars, which is again infinitely better. I enjoy Beast Wars a hell of a lot more than I enjoy Generation 1. But even having caught it after the fact, I still find this film to be, I can watch this one. I can't really watch the series.
I'm gonna have to rewatch it and listen for the music just so I can see exactly what everyone's talking about, because I never remember being put
And to
off
be
by
fair,
I can't get a
Dan-
sentence out.
Oh, I'm sorry.
No, go
Well,
ahead.
Dan mentioned the fan commentary.
No, I said
the
I
G.I.
felt like
Joe.
I was watching I felt like I was
Okay.
watching a fan edit when I was watching Transformers because of how oddly placed the music was.
Okay, well, as far as the animation and your complaints about the animation, they did do a fan commentary. I think it was on one of the multiple versions of the DVD release before the 20th anniversary release in 2007. In the fan commentary, they point out all of the mistakes in the animation, and if they hadn't done that, like I just assume it was some robot flying by. I didn't realize it was Ironhide at first. It's like
Some of that is stretching it. Some of it is exactly what it is. Fans thinking that some things are happening that aren't, whether it is or isn't. And a lot of times the animators are getting the blame for what should be being placed on editors. So let's not blur those two things. I hate calling stuff animation errors when it might not necessarily be an actual mistake in animation. Some of it's storyboarding and stuff like that didn't end up happening, and then it got edited wrong, etc. So let's not just say animation errors. I don't know. Like, my point is, obviously, I'm a big Transformers fan, but I view it all. I don't view it with necessarily. I hate the term rose-colored glasses or nostalgic glasses, because some Transformers stuff I hate, some Transformers stuff I like. So I mean, I don't just like it blindly because it. For me, this is the peak. This is the best. The best Transformers thing we've ever gotten was the animated movie. To me, nothing before or after has lived up to that. That's just my personal opinion. I know most people are going to disagree with me, so that's the reason why. But just as a kid, I always, maybe I'm morbid, but as a kid growing up, I never understood why characters never died. Maybe it's because I had death, a major death in my family growing up, and I didn't see cartoons as real because everyone was invincible. But to have a major character die like that, and to have a lot of characters die, I don't care the toy stuff, blah, blah, blah. It doesn't bother me. It didn't play into my mind when I was watching the film. To me, it was just groundbreaking to see characters actually die. Like I said, I don't have any problem with it being in the top 100. I don't think it should be number 3 like Mike ranked it. But like I said, the average was ranking it between 40 and 70. I have no problem with it being in there, but I'm sure we will have plenty of comments about Transformers, the movie. So let's move on and leave the commenting to the website posts.
47.
All right, after that, let's go somewhere nice and cuddly and friendly. The wonderful world of Disney. Number 47 from 1977. We talked about would this film show up or not when we talked about its sequel. Well, it does show up at number 47, and that is The Rescuers. On 13 lists, TV's Mr. Neil ranked at number 10 all time, 83 on Rotten Tomatoes. We do see the original film. We do see The Rescuers. We had mixed opinions on if we would see that or not, and it comes in all the way down at number 47. Dan, what are your thoughts?
Surprised, but I don't not necessarily surprised because I don't think it deserves it. Just surprised because I feel like it's one that gets lost in the shuffle compared to a lot of the other Disney films. It's personally for me, I think I was exposed to The Rescuers by the sequel Down Under before even I saw the original. So it's one that never really had a strong place for me. I remember watching it. I think part of it was that the newer version, the animation was so much better, just because of time and whatnot, that I just could not get into the older version of it. So I don't disagree that it should be higher. It's just for me personally, I never really had a strong place for me as my childhood or as my adulthood. But I think it's deserving. I think it's one of their better films for sure. But yeah.
To me, what The Rescuers and Rescuers Down Under both were like, to me, they're unique Disney films. Along with another one that I would put in with that, It's not like the old classic Disney. It's not like some of the other stuff they were trying. It's not like the stuff in the 90s. It's not. It just is kind of a unique in a kind of in an island all by itself. Rescuers Down Under, and like I said, one other film that was along that same time period I would put in with it. And that's kind of has some kind of magic to it to me. Maybe not magic, but something cool about it. That it is to me is different, but something that still resonated and still was high quality. Mike or Steve, thoughts on The Rescuers coming in at number 47?
Like I said with when we talked about Rescuers Down Under, I didn't even know about this film. It wasn't that I wasn't paying attention to it. It was the fact of Down Under was one of the first, if the only time at the time, that Disney did not use a number for a sequel. So I had caught this years later. I don't know, I'd probably say somewhere in the mid-90s. And I was like, oh, okay, so this is a prequel to the other film. And I know it's not. It's the original film, and then the other one was the sequel. But I don't know. I didn't really care for this. I didn't care for the story in this one. I like the other one better.
You know, it's interesting that you brought up, because it's something that I kind of forgot, but the last sequel we saw on our countdown was actually Rescuers Down Under. And it was number 71 on our list. That's the last time we've seen a sequel. I completely forgot to be looking out for that. So interesting that we now see The Rescuers. Steve, what's your thoughts?
I don't remember enough about it to make any comment. If it's anything like the Down Under, then I'd say fine.
Yeah, and most people ranked it, somewhere in the 50 to 70 range. So we have it coming in at 47, just because, like I said, 13 people voted on it. I'm surprised. I don't know. I guess I'll have to watch them both back to back to truly see again and revisit it a little bit. It's been a while since I've seen them both in their entirety and like in a back-to-back format to see which one I really like better. But we were kind of in agreement earlier that most of us like Down Under better than this one that have seen both of them. But yeah, interesting to see another film from the 70s show up. And we will see what trend we can either continue or break or where we go from here.
46.
As we march forward in our top 50 films, we get to number 46, and I guess it's been long enough, and it's time to visit the world of Pixar. Number 46. What will the first Pixar film be on our countdown? It was on 14 people's lists. Only got as high as 19, though, so nobody ranked it higher than 19. Rotten Tomato score of 92. Ranked anywhere from, mostly from in the 50, 60 range. We got it at number 46. The first Pixar film in our countdown, 1998's A Bug's Life. Maybe fitting. Mike, first thoughts on A Bug's Life and for Pixar finally being represented in our countdown?
Well, I'm glad Pixar is finally represented. I just hope Ratatouille's not on this list after this because, oh my god, A Bug's Life is so much better than that movie.
I hope it shows up just because it'll be another Ren and Stimpy moment for you.
Yeah, you just want me to throw the F-bomb all over the place, don't you? A Bug's Life, I liked it. I thought it was interesting. I thought, in between what Pixar had done before and after, I thought it was really, really cool. Generally, I'm not a fan of any kind of bugs, no matter what they are. But it was interesting as far as the story and as far as the animation went. I mean, it was top-notch Pixar, and the voice cast in this is just amazing.
Having Ratatouille show up ahead of this one would not be nearly the calamity of having Cars show up after this.
Well, at least you said Cars and not Cars 2, but...
Anyway, I just had to get that in there. Jab at you.
Yeah, jerk. The voice cast is like a who's who of Hollywood. I mean, every inch of Hollywood. You've got Dave Foley, Kevin Spacey, Julia Louis-Dreyfus, Phyllis Diller, Richard Kind, David Hyde Pierce. I mean, the way this movie was done was really, really good. The story was interesting, and I don't know. The funny thing with A Bug's Life, I think this and Ants, which is from DreamWorks, were released around the same time to compete with each other, and I always kind of gravitated more towards Ants. But going back and rewatching this, I don't know, a couple months ago, I really did enjoy it. I thought the animation was top notch. The sound effects and the music were really good. Is it something I'll watch again in the future? Who knows?
Steve, general thoughts on A Bug's Life?
Overall, not a bad film. I find it to be overall enjoyable. I think the voice acting is pretty good in it. I kind of like the plot of, you have this bumbling character that they're all happy to get rid of and ends up turning out to be their help in solving their problems through a goofy invention. So...
and Dan, A Bug's Life being the first Pixar film, what kind of gauge, is this the tip of the iceberg? What kind of gauge can we have on seeing that it's A Bug's Life that's the first one? Does it give hints to films that maybe don't make the countdown? Or does it give us hints as to where we are ranking Pixar in general? What are your thoughts of A Bug's Life being the first Pixar film?
I guess that would assume that Cars 2, Brave, and Monsters University will not make the list, which is the correct thing for us to do.
For Brave, I agree. The other two, not so much.
Oh my goodness.
Cars, I don't say I get out Cars 2 on this list. I always, A Bug's Life and Cars, I think, are always, to me, ranked near the bottom, besides, the ones I just mentioned are usually ranked near the bottom of Pixar. They can flip-flop. They're about even for me. So I think this is, the tip of the iceberg, and we're going to get a slew of Pixar as we go further in. I'm pretty sure this means that I would assume if this is 46, A Bug's Life is 46, that means that pretty much every other Pixar film besides, the ones that have come out in the last few years are probably going to be very high on this list. Just because I've waited this long to get to like one of the lower end Pixar films, I think that's a sign that there's a lot of Pixar love for the people who contributed to the list. Regarding Bug's Life itself, I think it's probably like the second best adaptation of Akira Kurosawa's Seven Samurai after Magnificent Seven. I do think it's a good movie. It's, like I said, it's lesser Pixar. The cast is strong. Animation's pretty good. It did, like Mike mentioned, it had that mirror movie effect where it was out at the same time as Ants. I, on the other hand, unlike Mike, I was more so a fan of Bug's Life than Ants, just because I think it was just more cheerful, and I thought the comedy was stronger because it had the Pixar visuals and the Pixar sensibility that I appreciate. I think it's a good spot for it. I would probably maybe think it could even go a little bit lower on this list. But I don't know. It's going to be interesting to see where the others fit.
It definitely is.
45.
Remember a while back when we hadn't seen an anime film in a long time, and then we saw 3 in a row. Number 45, 2006, from Pixar, Cars. Dan said these two are the bottom of the barrel. They should be next to each other. And so here we have it. It just barely beats out Bug's Life, only by a few points. On less list, but a few people ranked it high because we have a few people crazy like Mike and apparently Dan's sister ranked at number 2. Now I know that the movie taste in the family is not shared. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, it's on 11 lists.
Boy, that's even more a low blow than my film snob comment earlier.
Yeah, that was uncalled for.
Well, the first time I've been called a film snob. My wife calls me a film snob all the time, so I'm kind of used to it.
Wear it as a badge of honor. Anyways, number 45, Cars, right after number 46, A Bug's Life. Dan.
I'm glad it's not any higher. I don't hate Cars. I know a lot of people hate Cars. I don't love it nearly as much as my sister, apparently. But she's a board game aficionado, not necessarily a movie aficionado, so that's fine. but anyways, regarding Cars itself, for one, it has Paul Newman, so I love it right there because Paul Newman is simply the man. It's an okay concept. I think it is creating a world of just cars. I don't know. It's not the best thing that Pixar has come up with, but it's not it's not the worst because probably Cars 2 or Planes was a little bit worse than this, but it's fine. I mean, I do appreciate like the look back to Route 66 and some of those routes, but yeah, it is like I mentioned, lesser Pixar. I would say you could probably flip flop Bug's Life and Cars. I wouldn't have an issue with it, but them coming in right after each other is very apropos. So,
Steve,
any more?
I don't have a problem with the first Cars. So yeah, I mean, the story for it overall is enjoyable, and it's kind of cool how the whole thing plays out. And I didn't have a problem with the story or the characters or anything. I liked the animation and some of what they did there and incorporating Mater. But the I can see where the first one deserves to be on the list.
Yeah, I can see that it deserves on the list. Me personally, I'm not putting it in the top 50. I don't know if I put Bug's Life in the top 50 either. I think those two should be on the other side of the 50 mark, and we should have saw a Pixar film, a little bit earlier than we did. Them being back to back, I have no problem. I would put a Bug's Life and Cars flip flopped, but I know Mike wouldn't. So Mike, go ahead and get on your soapbox.
Well, here's the thing with Cars. Cars it's probably the first time I've ever really enjoyed Larry the Cable Guy in a character role outside of when he's with the other blue comedy guys. Like, I cannot stand him on his own stand-up comedy stuff, but as the character of Mater, it's a cool character. As far as the overall plot and the story, it's your average... Cars is basically an animated version of Days of Thunder, is really what it is. It's really what the first film is. The second film more so focuses on Mater. The other interesting thing with this is the voice cast. I mean, Dan said, and you said, Kev, you got Paul Newman, you've got all these other really, you've got, I mean, it just goes to show you how full on they pulled in the NASCAR stuff. You've got NASCAR announcers in this as characters. The interesting thing is Batman is a car and a Ken doll. You've got Michael Keaton as the villain in this. I really enjoy it. It's a good, fun film. Is it something that should be higher than this? No, probably not. But it's not. Cars is not. The Cars franchise is not the worst thing in all of film. That goes to Johnny Depp and a lot of his roles recently.
I am actually surprised that you didn't put this in your top 10 and proud of you in a way.
Because he's got the second one in there.
We won't touch that.
I don't even remember. I don't even think I saved my list.
Oh, that's good. You knew I had it, so you knew it was safe. All right, so we've had a double dose of Pixar. And we're down to the last 4 films of today's episode. Let's see what those are.
44.
It's number 44 on our list, although I'm sure in Mike's world, he probably wouldn't have it on our list just so that it would make more sense numerically. For the second time in our entire countdown, we're going to the 60s. And this time it's 1961. The Disney film is 101 Dalmatians.
I like that movie.
I know. I was just thinking that you probably would rather it be at spot 101. Anyways, it was on 15 people's list.
Jerk.
So 15 people's list. Only 5 people did not vote for this film. Like I said, the second film to predate 1970 that we've seen so far. The highest it got, though, was 24. Nobody ranked it higher than 24. It comes in at number 44. Rotten Tomatoes score of 97, which is darn high. We talked about Sword in the Stone at number 49. Now we're 5 spots later at 44, and we're talking about 101 Dalmatians from only 2 years earlier, even though it seems like a completely different world as far as the film goes. Dan, 101 Dalmatians in our top 50. Your thoughts?
I agree with it. I think it is far superior to something like Sword in the Stone because it has, I mean, for one, it has one of the Disney's best villains in Cruella de Vil. I mean, she is. I mean, if you look at a lot of the Disney animation villains, they're often based upon classic fables or fairy tales, or Cruella de Vil isn't, and she's just like this evil businesswoman that loves to kill puppies. So,
wait, all puppies go to hell? I'm sorry.
That would be her favorite movie of all time. But yeah, and I do remember loving this movie as a kid. I just remember the way the animals were used to communicate, like that, dog radio thing they would do as they would try to pass signals across, to one another. I remember really loving that as a kid for some reason. It's just something that sticks out to me. But it is an interesting movie. I mean, I think for a lot of kids, it probably helped increase the amount of Dalmatians that were sold, similar to how like Nemo caused people to go crazy and buy all those fish, back in the day. But yeah, I think it is. I talked about like Sword in the Stone is like not. It's probably lower Disney. I think 101 Dalmatians is upper middle. Nothing like near the best, but it stands out, and I think there's a reason why it comes up again and again. Like we talked about in MWire Weekly, they may be doing another related live action film. They did 2 live action films based upon it. There's just something about it. I think something about the story, and if you're a dog lover, you really can't do much better.
Steve, you don't usually like the animal Disney films. Do you like 101 Dalmatians?
It's all right, but I believe the trend continues.
What I like about Disney and how they do their dog films is that they basically make the humans secondary characters. Usually, the pets, run a human's life. And that's, generally here, it is shown where, Pongo is, basically making Roger stop work in the beginning of the film to take him out and take him to the park and take him on a walk. But the rest of the movie is pretty much from the dog's perspective and looking at the humans and seeing. That's one of the reasons why I really enjoy this movie is, seeing whatever it is that a dog's brain thinks of as far as humans and everything else. I think that is really, really cool. And Dan is right. It has one of the greatest Disney villains of all time in Cruella de Vil. And unlike All Dogs Go to Hell, you want to root for the heroes here for them to defeat Cruella more so than, oh, hey, we got to make sure we don't die in this movie like All Dogs Go to Hell was. And I really, really enjoyed it. I think the animation is really well done. And one of the things for me, why, you said that this came out a few years before Sword in the Stone. I don't see the two being able to compare them. I just don't. They're 2 very, very different films. And I've never, Disney films to me are one-shot adventures, unless you do sequels. But, you take a look at, something like 101 and a Sword in the Stone, I personally can't compare them to each other.
I can. 101 Dalmatians is better. Anyways, no, I'm not a huge 101 Dalmatians fan, actually. It's classic Disney. I do like the fact that there's so many of the dogs, obviously 101. I like that they each have their, little personality type thing. I agree that Cruella de Vil is one of easily the top 10, animated villains, probably of at least Disney, probably top 5 of Disney. So it has things going for it. I'm not surprised that it's in our top 100. I'm not surprised it's in our top 50. I'm kind of glad to see it now, though, rather than later, just because I'm not a huge fan of it. It's just interesting that it and Sword in the Stone are coming in within 5 spots of each other to me. So I don't know. We're going to see some interesting things, I think, as we're going through. I mean, we're starting to see some of the Disney films that outside of the 90s. So we'll have to see how many of those actually make the countdown, and we'll see what our last couple films are for today's episode.
43.
Number 43, we are going somewhere where we've been before, the late 90s. But this time, for something completely different. Number 43 is 1999's the South Park movie, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, from Comedy Central / Paramount. It was on 10 people's lists, 691 points. Highest it got ranked was number 9, Rotten Tomato score of 81. South Park, for a show that I was not ever into, I remember seeing this movie and just being completely impressed. We talked about it a little bit when we talked about Beavis and Butthead and a few other films. Just the message that they were getting across, the way that they masked something that most people think, the kids are just watching this trash or filth or whatever, and the underlying messages that they're putting through, especially in this movie, are just like, I don't know, it's very, very worthy of being in our top 50. What do you think, Dan?
I love South Park, Big, Longer, Uncut. I would even argue you could probably put this even higher. I mean, I applaud anything that attacks the MPAA, and South Park does it within their title. It's an interesting story that like South Park was able to pull off their title because the MPAA didn't realize what they were talking about. And then they finally realized it and tried to get them to change it, but they couldn't because they said yes, so they had to go with that title. If you don't know what it's about, then ask your parents, I guess. I don't know. But South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut is, to me, this is how you translate a cartoon television series to the big screen. It was a genius move to make it a musical. Matt Stone and Trey Parker are well versed in creating songs. You can just see that with their musical, The Book of Mormon. They know how to really make creative songs that are funny and very thoughtful. And I mean, this starts off, these so many amazing songs like, Blame Canada, their Uncle song. If we're trying to tape it a little PG, I won't say it word for word. And two, there's so much context to everything they're doing. They get at some of the aspects and the way people are treated, like the racial aspects of World War II and the way we treated soldiers then. They get at just the ridiculous way we look at movies and how we rate them and how we are so willing to allow violence to be okay, but bad language is something that we freak out about. There's a point to everything they're doing. You can look at it as gross out humor, but there's more to it than that. There's a lot of allegory to what they're doing, and they also homage like a billion different things. I mean, they do everything from anime to the movie Hook to classic things like The Great Escape and other films. They're great at taking bits and pieces of movies and homaging them in ways that you completely have no idea about if you're not aware of the material, but if you do, you get something extra. But yeah, I love Bigger, Longer, and Uncut, and I like I said, I think it could be even higher. And
you don't even need to be a fan or have any knowledge of the series to appreciate this film. To me, the social commentary, and I remember having to write some pretty long papers about stuff in college as far as in relation to what we were going through with school shootings and video game violence and violence in cartoons and violence in movies, and like this movie, the social commentary that this movie adds to that argument is so genius, and it's such a statement about the time period we live in, our generation, etc., and how a generation will try to look at every other thing that they can possibly try to put a blame on, except for the real reason. I mean, Blame Canada, the lyrics are just ridiculously on point, and that we'll try to blame a movie, a cartoon, a video game, whatever we can on violence, as long as we just keep the focus away from parenting and keep the focus away from that. It really boils down to, can you teach your kid the difference between right and wrong? I just think there's so many different layers. Dan, you've mentioned a bunch of other stuff that they touch on. There's so many different layers and levels to this movie. Like I said, it wasn't someone who watched the show a lot because I didn't get channels that it was on when I was growing up. But I just remember seeing the movie and being blown away. It's incredibly great. And I agree, it could even be higher. I'm just happy that it's at least in our top 50. Steve, your thoughts on South Park, the movie?
I actually saw that in theater. I would say that it's highly entertaining. I would say that it definitely pushes the bill. I love the fact that it, smacks the MPAA in the face, in multiple ways. The whole thing with adding the V chip, the songs that are in it, the showing what finally happens to Kenny, when he dies, hell being let loose. I mean, just the whole movie's enjoyable overall. I mean, it's taken all that mythos from the TV show, but pushed the envelope even farther.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, sure, you don't
hold on. We got to stop the record right now. We've had 4 people agree on one film. Hasn't happened in a while.
Shut the hell up. I agree because, yeah, you're right, Kev. You don't have to watch the series to get the film, but you do have to watch the series to get a certain amount of the jokes.
Oh, yeah.
Specific to the series. Like, not your everyday person unless you've watched a million YouTube videos of, oh my God, they killed Kenny. I mean, unless you've watched a million ways Kenny has died, you're not going to get that joke. Someone might react to that differently than someone that hasn't watched the series might react to that differently than someone who has. But everything Dan and Steve said, I mean, it's just that damn good of a movie.
Go ahead.
Anytime we can blame Canada, that's awesome.
That's just such a genius idea. Anyways, Dan, something we talked about a long time ago was, and you kind of mentioned it here as like one of the ideal situations of transitioning a cartoon series into a film. And we talked about it a long time ago about how many of those would we see. I bring it up now because we've seen a couple. We've talked about way earlier in the list, we talked about the Simpsons movie, we talked about Beavis and Butthead Do America. Now we've had South Park, Bigger, Longer, and Uncut. You can throw Transformers in there. There was there's been other films based on cartoon series. Is this the best of the best, and should we see any more? Are there any other ones that we could possibly be seeing, or are we done with movies based on a cartoon series?
I would say this is the best of the best. I can't think of anything else that would qualify, or I can't even think of another one that I think would be. I know you've had someone like the Dogs movies or the Rugrats movies, but I don't see them making this list at this point. At least I hope not. But I do think South Park, Bigger, Longer, Uncut is bar none the best transition from a cartoon television series to live action. But I mean, the only other thing I could possibly seeing it because it's so popular would be one of the Family Guy movies like Blue Harvest, but I think the likelihood is low.
That would be awesome to just see Mike's reaction. We talked. The other one that we talked about before was the Turtles movie, and would we see Turtles Forever versus TMNT, which we saw. I assume that people would be up in arms if at this point we saw G.I. Joe the movie. I should almost be scared, I guess, given the amount of 90s animated films. Should we see DuckTales the movie come in? Is that the same crowd that's voting on all those other ones? Phineas and Ferb, some of that stuff. So could be interesting. Mike, any thoughts?
Who knows if Across the Second Dimension will show up? I don't think it will. It might, but I don't know. I mean, I think it's interesting to see how far we've come in the 3 episodes of the actual countdown that we've done. I don't know. I just
we'll have to wait and see. Only going through more movies will show us what is yet to come. So let's get to another one on our list.
42.
Only 2 spots left today, guys. And the first one of those is number 42. Interestingly, we have not seen the likes of this one yet today. We have not seen a single film from DreamWorks today. That stops now at number 42. The year is 2008, and the movie is Kung Fu Panda. Also, the first film to garner more than 700 points, 723 points to be exact. Steve, you had the highest ranked at number 23, Rotten Tomatoes of 87. Most people had it ranked, somewhere in the 50s or 60s. We have it coming in at number 42. Let's start with Steve. Since you had it ranked the highest, are you upset you had it ranked 23? We're giving it here at number 42. How do you feel about that?
No, I mean, I feel that's a nice balance of it. I like I said again, I tried putting films and not putting their sequels in on my top 100, so I at least tried to represent something from each particular franchise or series of films. Generally, I find the first film to be the best one out of a lot of these DreamWorks films that happen to get released in certain Pixar films or film. No, I mean, overall, I enjoyed the animation style on this. I enjoyed the tone, a lot of the voice acting in it. The whole concept of it was interesting to me. I did find myself laughing at points just because of how stupid some of Jack Black's Ho character is. But no, I mean, overall, I really think that this film deserves to be on the top 100. I don't know if it deserves to be over the top 50 or under the top 50, but I think where it's at's fine.
Mike, your thoughts on this one?
It's an okay film. It's the animation is good. The story is interesting. I just wish it wasn't Jack Black as the main character.
Oh, Jack Black's good.
I don't think it hinders it.
I don't
think it hinders it having him though.
Well, I just don't like a lot of his humor. I don't hate the guy, but there are just certain movies of his that I just don't care for.
Legends of Awesomeness is a good cartoon series. I just wanted to throw that out there.
Maybe that'll be ranked in the 40s or the 50s next time we do a series countdown.
Dan, when we talked about the first Pixar films that hit with Bug's Life and then Cars, we were talking about how we gauge the Pixar library in general and what we thought we might see or what we might think we might not see. We've seen some DreamWorks films already. Seen Kung Fu Panda at 42. How do you gauge what's left for DreamWorks in our countdown without naming names or anything? Do we see more DreamWorks? Is this the best they have to offer? Do they have other stuff that we haven't seen yet? How are we gauging DreamWorks?
I definitely don't think this is the best they have to offer. I do think it is the best DreamWorks movie off the top of my head that we have gone through so far. Maybe, I guess you could say Chicken Run might be, they may be a little bit even, but I'm actually a huge fan of Kung Fu Panda. I did not expect to be when I went to see it. I didn't see it in theaters. I ended up just seeing it at home. And like Mike, I'm not a huge Jack Black fan. I do find him funny in the right spots. Like, I think he's really good in School of Rock. I do like Tenacious D. To me, like, having him in this role actually works. Like, his voice acting and his sensibilities are perfect for the character of Po in a lot of ways. And two, I know very little about martial arts. I love martial arts films, but the only martial arts I've ever done is like imitating Three Ninjas as a kid. But from what I hear from people that are well versed in martial arts, it's very true to that art form, and a lot of what it gets right. I mean that's just secondhand, but I'm impressed if that is the case. And the action in this is just outstanding. Like, some of the action sequences are fantastically well choreographed. The set pieces are unique, and I just love a lot of the characters. I mean, and how they incorporate their martial arts style into the actual design of the character. And I just too, like Mike and Steve mentioned, and I think Kevin, you too, the animation is pretty awesome. I think it's up there for DreamWorks, but it's one of their best. I think it's much better than the Pixar films we've talked about, but there are a couple of DreamWorks movies that I'm thinking of that are better than it, but it's one that has surprised me, and I do think it is on the right side of the top 50.
Yeah, I agree. I can see that. I agree that it's near the top of DreamWorks library. I don't think that leaves a lot of room for too many more DreamWorks films, but I agree that I have a couple in mind that I would rank above it. Only one spot left today. I really liked where we were going today. I think we turned some corners and we're going in the right direction. I don't know about the note we're going to end on, though.
41.
I said we could be opening a can of worms with a couple different things that we were talking about today, but I still believe that they were at least correctly ranked on the right side of the 50 mark. I think this one may cause some hate, and I don't understand it. Coming in at number 41, the year is 2012, and the movie is Brave. It was on 12 lists, 724 points, got as highly ranked as number 13. Most people had it ranked between 40 and 65. It comes in at number 41 in our top 50. The movie Brave. Who wants to begin?
I would watch Kung Fu Panda 1,000 times over more than this crap. Brave to me is basically a updated animated version of Braveheart, except with magical mysticism, stupid curse crap in it. I can't believe
it's like Shrek 4. It's like Shrek 4.
No, it's more like Kung Fu Panda 2.
I can see
more like
this.
Shrek 4.
I could see this being listed when we were listing other stuff from current, way long time ago, like in the first episode when we're talking about stuff like Rise of the Guardians, whether that should be or not. Maybe it's just something that's in our mindset because it's so recent. Some other stuff that we talked about way early on, like what am I thinking of? Rise of the Guardians. We talked about. I think Cloudy the Chance of Meatballs is way better than that. We talked about Princess and the Frog.
Yeah.
We talked about Meet the Robinsons. I can see maybe Brave being listed amongst them somewhere. But in our top 50, Dan, does it deserve anywhere near that?
I do not think so. Like I mentioned, I'd assumed this wasn't going to make the list. So I'm after A Bug's Life and Cars appeared. To its credit, it did win Best Animated Film at the Oscars. Not that means much or anything. Not that it should have, but I don't get the Braveheart comparison. I don't think there's anything at all similar to the story with Braveheart. I think you can make a bit better comparison to like Brother Bear, which is a very similar story, which is not a good comparison. I don't hate Brave. I don't love it. I do think the animation is great. I do think the animation of I forget her name at the moment, but the main character's hair is really well done. I think Michael Powers, who is part of the Geekcast Radio, summed it up best when I've heard him say this, so I want to credit him, where he says it's Pixar's visuals with a Disney story, and that's very much what Brave is. The story is not up to the level that we expect with Brave. It does have a great score to it, and like I said, the animation is really well done, and I do like the voice cast too, and even the one song that was created for it was pretty good. Still, with that, I don't think it deserves to be up this high. And like I mentioned and like you mentioned, Kevin, some of the similar, like the stuff that just came out, maybe a little bit fresh in people's minds, so it got ranked by more people than it probably should have, or higher than it probably should have. But I don't know. It's a good movie. I could see it deserving for top 100. But I would throw it more so in the 80s or the 70s.
Yeah, I agree. Steve, what are your thoughts on Brave?
It's all right. I can see where the visuals and the acting and some of it, but I don't see the mass appeal for it.
No, I'm just I don't know. I think this one stands out for me.
The only thing that would be more insulting after number 41 is if The Croods was higher than Brave, because The Croods was worse than Brave.
So we'll have to wait and see.
What now? I've carefully studied every Justice Leaguer, past and present, and created contingency plans to neutralize you, should that ever become necessary.
You've got to be kidding me with that.
Neutralize, not kill. Whoever implemented my plans altered them.
It's still a completely unacceptable breach of our trust.
The members of the Justice League are among the most powerful and potentially dangerous people on the planet.
You think one of us would go over to the other side?
Or succumb to mind control. Yes, it's possible. That's why I developed plans for containing any or all members of the JLA, should the need ever arise.
None of us would ever do that to you.
Then you're damn fools.
Yeah, I don't know. That is where we end the countdown on a very weird note for me. Just looking back, though, a little bit here on what we've done today, with both the 10 on the one side of 50 and the 10 on the other side of the 50. I think the whole countdown for me shifted, and it shifted right around number 55. I think the first 5 that we talked about today were kind of still following Pat with the 90s stuff with Anastasia and Mulan. We had another DC film with Justice League Crisis on Two Earths. It was feeling much like the rest of the countdown that prior to that had felt. And then with 55, when we went to the 70s with Charlotte's Web, and then we got into, the anime triad of Ghost in the Shell, My Neighbor Totoro, and Howl's Moving Castle, into a couple films before the 70s with Sword in the Stone and 101 Dalmatians, some Pixar films with Bug's Life and Cars. Everything seemed like it was shifting. South Park in there for, something based on a cartoon. I think Brave kind of sticks out a little bit as weird. Kung Fu Panda, like you said, one of the better DreamWorks films. So I see things shifting a little bit, with the exception of Brave. Dan, what are your thoughts on today's episode so far and where it leaves us as we've gone 60 through 40?
I think we're starting to finally break away. I'm glad we're finally breaking away from more of the current stuff, Brave notwithstanding. I'm glad, similar to the first episode where we had a well-versed of different styles, same thing here. We have anime, we had stop-motion animation, DC, we all kind of went all over the board, and I'm glad we're finally seeing some older films. So that's a very good thing to see. I hope that's a sign of things to come. And I'm glad that I'm very happy that we maybe got certain films out of the way. Yeah, I'm glad we're finally seeing Pixar. I'm glad we're finally seeing, certain films like, South Park, things that are switching up a little bit. So we're not constantly talking about Disney from the 90s and 2000s. So.
Another couple of things before Steven and Mike give some thoughts on what we've done so far. It's going to be an interesting shift now because now we move from, I guess it was the theme of today's episode was going places we had not yet been, to try not to be completely using someone else's tagline. We hadn't had anything prior to the 70s. We hadn't had any Pixar. We had been 30 spots before we had, since we had any anime. And so a lot of the thought process up to this point was, when are we going to see the first of this or the first of that? And now I think it starts to shift to, is this the last of this? Is this the last of that? Have we seen the last DC film? When do we see the last DreamWorks film? When do we see the last film from the 90s? Stuff like that. Have we seen the last of certain things? So that's something to look kind of as we're moving into this later half now too. Mike, your thoughts on today's episode and where the countdown has gone so far?
It's weird now. It's just weird.
Thanks for your elaboration.
Well, the variety is good. I don't agree with where a lot of the DreamWorks and Pixar films should be.
I think it's hard to judge until we see the entire picture.
Well, right, but so far, 100 to 41, there's only maybe 20 films out of that group that I might agree with. And I'm more so I knew Transformers wasn't going to make top 20. I didn't, I ranked it as high as I did because it's a really enjoyable movie for me. And for me, it is one of the best all time, even though we're not technically calling this all time. It's just one of those things where all of the other, and again, it goes back to my point. Disney and Pixar are going to dominate this list. Disney more specifically than Pixar, but look at animated films in the last I don't know, since the 30s. Who has had the highest presence? Disney. So whether it's sequels, whether it's original films, whether it's, something that they've never done before, Disney's going to have probably the highest percentage of a presence on this list. I'm interested to see where the top 40 going into the top 30 takes us, but this episode was just too damn weird for me.
There was a little of everything in this episode. It is that transition episode. It is that going past the halfway, turning corners, doing all kinds of weird stuff. And I don't know, I'm excited to see, as we reveal each one going forward, what people's reactions are and how people think we do. Steve, thoughts so far on today's episode and the countdown overall?
Today's episode, I'm not disappointed. I mean, I'm happy to see that some other franchises and other series got some love in here besides strictly DC or strictly Disney. I still have my thoughts on future DC films that will show up. I have a guess that there'll be at least one, but at most 5 before the end of the countdown. If there's going to be any more, I have a feeling that there'll be at least one that should resonate more than some others. But no, I kind of guess that there might be some more anime or something showing up later too. More obviously Pixar films will show up because if we're starting with The Bug's Life, Toy Story is going to be somewhere near the top 10, or Toy Story 3, one of the two. But yeah, I'm overall the entire countdown has been interesting and kind of frustrating on a personal level, but that's again why we have multiple people gauging this instead of a giant bias poll.
I think one thing that you can certainly say about today's episode is it is one of the most diverse group of 20 that we've seen, since we have Pixar, DreamWorks, Disney. We had even a Bluth film in there with All Dogs Go to Heaven, Blue Sky with Anastasia, The Aardman with Fantastic Mr. Fox. We had anime. We had more recent stuff with Rango and Brave, some older stuff with Sword in the Stone and 101 Dalmatians, DC film. I mean, it was definitely a diverse episode and collection of movies, not to mention South Park and some other stuff like that, Transformers. Let's put Dan on the spot because I love Dan's predictions.
Because they're always wrong.
Dan, will we see any more? Will we see a Marvel movie or will we see any more DC movies? We only have 40 spots left.
I don't think it's possible to see a Marvel movie at this point unless someone voted for the Avengers. DC, yes. I think there's one in particular that is about a certain person who wears a cowl that will probably show up on the list. I don't know. I didn't expect Justice League Crisis of Two Earths, so maybe even more the Justice League. Not that I dislike those movies, but I think we personally have ranked the best of the DC movies, so hopefully we don't see any more besides one very fantastical one that was in the early 90s. But so yeah, that's my prediction. One more DC, no Marvel, maybe, and no Image.
Any more anime?
Yes, hopefully, because my number one hasn't showed up yet. So
just give me a ballpark number just off the top of your head. How many anime would you like to see the rest of the way?
What do you have? 40? So we have
40 spots.
40 left. I would say at least 1/4, so maybe at least 10 more anime films in the last 40. I think that would be fair. Probably should have more than that, but considering what we've gone so far, but we even may see a little bit more. But I think at least hopefully 10 more is not too much to ask.
And last one, I'm going to put you on the spot one more time. Kind of mentioned it before, but how many more DreamWorks films?
1, 2. Good question. I'd say probably maybe three or 4. I'm probably completely off. It's going to be, but I would say 3 or 4.
All right. Mike, any thoughts before we close this episode out?
As far as DreamWorks, I can think of maybe 2.
Fair enough.
Or 3 that should show up. At least one in particular, even though I'm not that big of a fan of it. I like it. I don't go all gaga over it like a lot of other people do. Other than that, there's no way. Marvel animation, Marvel direct-to-DVD film animation does not. There's just no way. It's a DC knockout when it comes to the DVD animation. Maybe, possibly, I'm just going to go ahead and name it. Maybe, possibly Planet Hulk, but I seriously doubt it.
Steve, last word before we close this one out.
Like I said, I already stated my opinion on DC, and I'm with Dan. I don't see a snowball's chance in hell of Marvel showing up now. But again, Marvel doesn't hold a candle to DC animation in the film realm. Live action, it's the opposite. But again, that's I digress.
All right.
But I hope that it keeps being diverse through the remainder of the top 100, and just kind of looking forward to seeing what shows up next.
All right.
I'm just waiting for a couple of the numbered Disney sequels to show up so Kevin's head will explode.
I'm just waiting for multiple people's heads to explode as we reveal different films that are in our top 40. Before I flip it back to you, Mike, Dan, you get the final word. Give us a grade so far in our countdown and your last thought.
Wow, a grade? Jeez, that's tough. I would say, wow, maybe I would say B+. I don't think it's possible to get an A, but I think it's B+ because A, we're seeing diversity. Maybe not everything is in the right place. Maybe something shouldn't be where it should be. But I think what we are seeing is that a lot of even the biases of the people recording, a lot of biases of the network are being overridden. It's just, I think, a hodgepodge of people putting this list together, which is a good thing. So I think that gives us a B+. Maybe that, you can argue all day, all night that this belongs here, but at least we're not seeing like DC, Marvel, Disney like the same thing over and over again. So I think that's a plus.
All right, Mike.
Well, there you have it. Numbers 60 to 41 of the GCRN Top 100 Animated Films Countdown. Join us next time when we will be revealing numbers 40 to 21. For now, I am TFG and Mike with
Steve Megatron Phillips,
Movie Revolt Dan,
and Optimus Solo.
Thank you for listening. Until next time, unleash the Countdown Geek in you.
You've just listened to Geekcast Radio on the Geekcast Radio Network. There are several ways to get in contact with us or leave feedback for the show. First, visit the website, geekcastradio.com, where you can comment on all of our different podcasts. Second, you can rate our show and leave us feedback in iTunes. Third, follow us on Twitter at Geekcast Radio. Fourth, become a fan on Facebook. Go to facebook.com/geekcastradio. Call the voicemail line 502-526-5821. Please remember to tell us the show you are leaving the message for and your name. So until next time, unleash the geek in you.